covered patio today because it is too hot to sit in the car. Um, I had a great 4th of July last week. It was I believe it's going to be the last time that they are going to allow the massive amount of fireworks out on the beach at the Long Beach Peninsula. Um, I had grown up here in, the corner of the Pacific Northwest for pretty much my entire life. And you always hear about the fireworks show up on the Long Beach Peninsula. Now, I've heard about this and I knew it was a lot, but when I went up there for the 4th of July, if you can imagine, like, the crazy neighbor who buys like $1,000 worth of illegal fireworks and sets them off, if you can imagine seeing 500 crazy neighbors, both sides of you up and down the beach lighting off fireworks, that's what it was like. It was so intense that it was like the smoke filled the air to the point that you couldn't even see the fireworks at times. And it was like almost to the point of obnoxious. Like I could have, I swear there must have been $1 million worth of fireworks that went off in a couple of hours there. And never had I seen anything so, like I said, so belligerent, so obnoxious, so crazy amount of like flashes and booms. It was overwhelming to the point. But I'm glad I got to experience it. I'm glad the boys got to experience it. But yeah, the Long Beach Peninsula fireworks show is incredible. Like, unlike anything you'll ever see. All right. But speaking of things unlike anything ever seen, the de-dollarization and de-risking that has taken place here. For as much talk as you hear about de-dollarization, there is also the very effort of de-risking from China. Now, when you have such conditions taking place, you wonder, like, what is it that is actually going to be the outcome from this? Now, when you think about like manufacturing here in the United States, there is no way that we are going to be able to manufacture any cheaper than what they can do in China or say another nation out there. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be manufactured in China. Right? There is a lot of places around the world in which that things can be manufactured, and it's not just the location of China that is exclusive to manufacturing. It just happened to be the cheapest place over the last few decades. That was very common for, producers to send their manufacturing base to, was China. Now, when we think about like what it is that China is doing right now, because the idea is that China wants to get out of the dollar, right? They want to de-dollarize and have less dependence on the dollar and try to make the yuan more of a world currency. Now that's very like possible. It's not an impossible thing that can happen. The only impossible thing that's going to happen right now is providing the world with enough yuan in order for them to do the transactions that are needed. The dollar is by far the most dominant world trade currency that could possibly be out there. There's nothing that even remotely comes close to it. But there is a lot of talk about how the yuan, or how China wants to make the yuan more dominant inside of this world trade. Now, in order to do that, there's a couple of things that really need to happen. One of them is that you need to provide the world with a safe and liquid asset. And now the United States has the United States treasuries, right? Now, although I'm not saying that it's like, exactly a safe asset, but comparatively to the rest of the assets out there when it comes to debt obligations, the US Treasury is by far the safest place you can be. Zero chance of default with a guaranteed payment because we have the printing press to do it. Now, that's how the United States is able to provide the world with a safe and liquid asset. China is suggesting, or at least not necessarily China, but the suggestion is that China is going to back the yuan with gold, which would make it a very stable currency, and it would also make it a very like desired currency as well, as people around the world would love the stability of having gold. The only problem with that is the same problem that the United States faced when it was on a gold standard and we had a manufacturing base, is that how do you provide the world with enough gold to buy the stuff from you? Right? That's where the problem with the United States is that they acquired all the gold, right? And they didn't want to give it up. So this is why we started issuing out a lot of fiat currency to make up for the fact that we didn't want to redistribute the gold back out there to the world. So when you go on a gold standard, what you are basically asking the world to do is to send you all their gold for your manufactured goods. And that's not going to really go over very well as people start to lose all their gold holdings. Now, it does sound good, like I said, to have a gold-based currency. It's going to be very stable. It's going to keep prices very stable. Your savings will, be able to have the same purchasing power going into the future. But the problem with it is that it creates a boom and bust cycle, unlike what people today are going to be able to handle, right? They don't prepare for the future in a way that says, hey, we can, save for, the rainy days, so to speak. They don't ever anticipate rainy days. And so the gold standard with the booms and bust cycles is actually very devastating to the people. And really, when you have a fiat currency and an elastic money supply, the people don't really think about the booms and bust cycles. They think about the debt cycles that take place instead, and stimulus packages coming out from the government, and it's much easier for them to handle that. Not saying it's better. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that the people could handle that situation a lot better. So you end up with this Triffin's dilemma. How do you get the currency out there to the world to buy your stuff? And that's really where the United States has pretty much got the corner of the market, is because we also are the biggest consumer, right? So if you can consume the world's stuff, right, then you are exporting your money out to them. And if you have a fiat currency where you can print up just about as much money as you want, you can provide the world with a continuous supply of money. Not that it's great, not that it's good. I'm just saying that you can do it, right? And you can provide the world with this, currency that goes out there that can then be used for world trade. If you switch that over to a gold standard, you are very much going to limit how much currency is in the world that can be used, and you're going to limit the manufacturing base that you have, because people are not going to be able to just, print up money and then, send it off to you to buy your stuff. And so what you end up with is a very limited amount of manufacturing that can take place. And I would only assume that if you have that kind of limitation to manufacturing, what you are going to do is you're going to create a lot of risk amongst those who are dependent on international trade. So what will happen is that you end up pulling a lot of that dependency from other nations. You start bringing it to a more local distribution. And that's what we're starting to see now with the decoupling and the de-risking coming from China. So anyway, blasted that out for 7 minutes. Let's go ahead and have the discussion about this. If you're just now getting into the live stream, go hit that like button. The YouTube algorithm will pick up the video and start spreading it around for more people to come into the talk. Digital gold backed bricks will hammer the dollar. It might. I mean, that's a very that's a very logical way to think about it, right? The only problem with it is that if you give it some time, what you are going to do is you're going to deprive the world of a currency, and you will also deprive the world of the manufacturing of whatever it is that manufacturing state can produce, because there won't be enough gold to continue to send to them before they end up having all the gold, increasing their standard of living, falling into luxuries, and redistributing the gold back out there, destroying their manufacturing base. Very much like what happened here in the United States. The only difference is that we didn't go through the major depression like we should have, or poverty-stricken depression. Instead, we severed the gold standard and went onto a fiat currency. The gold standard will create booms and busts, no doubt about it. Right? How was town, guys? All right, let's cruise back up to the top up here. All right. First, thanks, Simon. Hey, man, no surrender. Yo, UE suck. EU up. Okay, UE is what it said. What's that? Oh, I stole your power, guys. Here. No, here, you can take it. I got 80% power. They're firing up the Traeger. They're going to smoke some meat. All right. Hi from Bloomington, Indiana. All right, howdy folks, howdy Mr. Uneducated. Hello guys. Aloha from Ohio. Hello from Anaheim. Oh, dishes every day, send me a heart. She's sitting right here. All right, good afternoon from Lakeland. Hey Kevin, how's it going, man? All right, we no longer have the tooling for manufacturing here in the great United States. No, you're right, but there could always be a retooling. There can always be a re-establishing of the manufacturing base here in the United States. The only problem with it is that it's too expensive to, right? It's cheaper to manufacture in another location and ship it to us. So I mean, if you want to become a manufacturer, again, you have to lower your standard of living, right, in order to deal with it. Otherwise, it's just too expensive. We demand too much pay for our products. That's why we only build the most awesome products here, right? I mean, if you're going to manufacture something in the United States, it's got to be the best in the entire world, and it is too. There appears to be mismatched extension cords plugged in behind Simon, orange and yellow. Oh, the yellow one goes to the cafe lights that I have, and the orange one goes over to the Traeger. So they serve two different purposes. Taylorsville, Utah. Oh yeah, the fireworks are unreal. We go all the time. The thing is a chaotic as it looks. Everyone is very respectful of each other. Yeah, that's one thing I definitely saw, that everybody was having a really good time. There was no like, well, I mean, a lady, I think she was probably drunk or something. She did get pulled over and arrested in front of us. But, I mean, what do we get for being drunk driving on the beach, right? It's still a highway. Now, I mean, I don't know about Washington, it is in Oregon, but I assume that it is. Anyhow, when I went to leave, like the approach, like I was driving my friend's Suburban and it was just too heavy for the stand and it ended up getting stuck. And at the approach, because it was just tore up from so many trucks driving on and off the beach, there was a couple of guys there who were just having a ball pulling people out. They had their big truck, big tires, they were like just yanking everybody out. They were just like really enjoying it, like really enjoying their moment, being able to do that, and like kind of like serving the community, being able to get people back off the beach so they can, so that traffic could flow again. They were like having a really good time, and they ended up yanking us off the beach too. I almost made it to the approach. I ended up like maybe, I don't know, 40 feet short of the approach, and it was stuck. Like there was no way I was backing up and going forward. But these guys, they hooked me up, gave me a couple of, pulls on the old tow rope, and I was back up on the hardscape again. It was awesome. All right. Okay. That needs to change though. Screw those people. We need to have currency backed by all assets. Personal responsibility is the new counterculture. I can't believe this guy has both an orange and yellow extension cord plugged into the same outlet. Yeah, one of them is operating a bunch of LED lights, and the other one's operating the smoker. So I'm not too concerned about that. Alright. Geez, you guys are that, like, you got hung up on the extension cords? That's so weird. Alright. I gotta be careful of the background. Alright, hello, Yui. Did you see Janet Yellen bow twice to Xi Jinping of China? It's purely political or much deeper. It's all political. I think they're getting their stories straight so they know how to use their mainstream media for propaganda, and they're telling the right story, I mean, if you're gonna lie, right, you gotta make sure that you get your story straight first, Alright, we need currency backed by gold and silver. Again, like, I'm down for it. I'm totally down to have gold and silver back in the currency. I mean, I'm ready for it. I know, at least from the history that I have read, how it is that this gold and silver currency is going to be handled. For the most part, I know also that it's going to create booms and bust cycles that are not something that the people are prepared to handle. Right? And now, I mean, let's do it. Like, I'm ready for it. I'm ready to see it happen, right? And ready to take on a strategy to deal with the gold-backed currency. But most people around the world have no clue of what a gold-backed currency would be like, or how a government is going to behave with a gold-backed currency, because these like stimulus packages and stuff like that, you're on your own, because they wouldn't have the ability to just go and print up a bunch of money and deal with downturns in the economy like they do today. You would literally have to go through the booms and bust cycles, and people are they're not ready for it. Hey bro, we were Chinese, do not bow. This is Japanese greetings, so it is just say that Yellen is uncultured and made a fool of herself. Yellen just said decoupling from China is impossible. It is going to be, like, a complete decoupling from it would be impossible, just like the United States dollar losing its world reserve currency status overnight would be impossible. It can't happen like that. It's going to take forever. Like, even the yuan right now only represents like less than 3% of the world trade, where like the dollar represents like something like over 50%, like 55% of the world trade right now, or even more. So it's like, even if the yuan tripled its amount that it did, it would still be just insignificant comparatively to what the dollar is doing. You know, it has such a long ways to go, right? And when you hear all this talk about it, it seems like it's happening very quickly and that it's happening in a dramatic form or something like that. And it does happen, right? It is happening, and it's happening in a big number as well, but it's not happening in a big enough number comparatively to what the dollar is doing. This doesn't even remotely come close yet. So will it? Sure, give it time, like decades, you know. These turkeys are getting on the deck again. Get out. Hold on 1 second, guys. Get out of here, you. Go on. So the turkeys see me up here and they want to come hang out. Math is the true money. The sooner you realize it, the better you'll be. Understand finite supply BTC. Again, it doesn't matter whether it's BTC or gold, right? What you're going to have is the exact same thing that happens no matter what, right? It's economic forces that are at play. And what you're going to have is, if you have a fixed income, is that the most industrious nations out there are going to produce and export their stuff. What they are going to get back is their Bitcoin or their gold or whatever it is, right? If this continues, what they are going to do is concentrate all the Bitcoin and gold into the hands of the most industrious nations. Their lifestyle will then begin to elevate because they're going to enjoy that new money. As their lifestyle begins to elevate and they're enjoying the new money that is coming in, they are going to start increasing the purchases of foreign production to compete with their own domestic manufacturing. This is how the system works, right? And so what will end up happening is that their lifestyle will elevate. They will start buying the foreign production. They will export their manufacturing, and you'll have a separation between the rich and the poor, right? The only people who have anything are the people who have the money at the top or the new money coming in. Everybody else will suffer with high prices and no job. And this is the case that happens no matter what. If you have a fixed income, a fixed currency, the most industrious nations will get the money, right? They'll elevate their lifestyle. They'll start bringing in foreign production. They'll export their domestic manufacturing. Eventually, the new money will be gone. They will fall into poverty, and the most industrious foreign producers out there will end up with the money and the bigger lifestyle, or the increase in lifestyle. It's just going to be that way if you have a fixed currency. Now, I'm ready to deal with that. I mean, I hope you guys are too, if that's what you want to do. And if that's the case, then let's do it, right? Let's make that happen and learn how to live with that kind of system. But I just don't feel that most people are going to be able to deal with that. And they're going to beg the government to do something, and the only way they can do anything about it is if they live it on a fiat currency, all right? Which isn't good, but it's just the case. All right. 112 watching and only 38 likes. Get to work, slackers. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we got 51 people who have hit the like button. If you go and hit that like button, it would be great. We get the video grabbed by the YouTube algorithm, start spreading it around, more people will start joining the conversation. Maybe it's time to get a window unit for the patio if it's enclosed. It's not. It's all open on one side. It just basically has two walls to it. And then I do all the barbecuing over on the far side, so that hopefully all the smoke leaves. All right. It'll be cold soon. Smash the like button. Yes, please do so. Oh, please, can we stop leveraging the canned talk? Huh. Thoughts on used car market? Yeah, I don't know. Well, like, my thoughts on the used car market is the same that it's always been. I mean, cars are disposable. They should be cheap and thrown away, right? I buy $500 cars. I buy $1,200 cars. I use them as long as I possibly can, and then once they are no longer good anymore, I send them off to the wrecking yard. I get my $100, scrap fee for it, and I use that to register the next vehicle or something like that. I look at used cars as a worthless item, right? The only thing that they are good for is transporting you from A to B, right? And if you are buying a used car because it makes you look cool, I don't know how that works. Like, I'm not interested in that at all. As far as the used car market of today, I think that you're probably going to find where the used car market is probably going to come down quite a bit, at least for the prices of it. Just considering that most people are not going to be finding that buying into a car in the future is something that they are going to find like a necessity in their life. Like if you have a bunch of money, you get the stimulus package coming in, and all of a sudden you have this money, you're like, man, I'm going to go get me a nice fancy car, right? But then if you have concern about the future coming and you have, worried about your pay and you're worried about things like that, you would actually downgrade your car into a cheaper car, leaving the more expensive one out there to, for somebody else to buy. So I could see something like that starting to take place. But, again, at the exact same time, if you don't have a lot of vehicles being manufactured, or you don't have a lot of imports coming from other nations or something like that, then it would create a demand for vehicles just from the lack of inventory out there. But I personally think that vehicle prices are probably going to come down, as people are not going to find that, buying expensive or putting more money to vehicles is like, I don't think that's something that's going to be like happening like it did when you had the stimulus checks, right? Anyway, that's kind of my opinion on it. Well, time will tell, but I think the used car market is going to come down. And speaking of used cars, my parents gave me their Explorer. They got a 98 Ford Explorer, if you can imagine that, with like 90,000 miles on it. They hardly ever drove the thing. Anyway, they have other vehicles, and this one was just kind of sitting in their driveway not doing anything. They asked me if I wanted it. So I got this 98 Ford Explorer coming to me that's in really good shape. And I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to build that thing up, Instead of putting a bunch of money into a new vehicle, I might just build this Explorer up and make it cool, Put a little lift kit in it, put some bigger tires on it, have something I can take out onto the beach. And that will be my cool ride, instead of getting a Camaro or something, All right. Gustavo, I'm sorry. I saw your email this morning, and I am going to answer that. I do apologize. I did get your email, and I'm going to go back and answer that. What happens to the dollar in the short term, 6 months to a year? What do you mean? Like, I think the dollar is going to grow stronger over the course of the next, 6 months to a year, as the Federal Reserve continues with their tightening program, their quantitative tightening. A lot of people don't think that that's happening. They're saying, no, after the bank bust or whatever happened, that the Federal Reserve went and, started up the printing press again. That's not necessarily the case. They did. There was an additional, like, $1 trillion in bailout for the bank term funding program that was, added, but that quickly has disappeared again. The Federal Reserve is definitely in a tightening cycle. They are pulling the liquidity out of the market, and they are promising to do this for a while. Like, I don't see any reverse to this action for at least another year, right? And this is just by their own words. Now, whether or not that takes place, time will tell on it. But it's pretty obvious that they're pulling a lot of this liquidity out of the market. And this is one of the reasons why so many people are actually moving to this de-dollarization idea, is because they simply just can't get the dollars to function. Argentina is a great example of this. Argentina pretty much uses the dollar as their currency, right? If you have a dollar in Argentina, it is probably the more prized currency of anything else out there, including their own local currencies, right? But the problem that they are facing now is the lack of dollars within their nation. It's just like they're just simply not there. And they can't do commerce without dollars, right? Especially international trade if you don't have it. So now they're switching over to yuan because it's at least available to them, unlike the dollar is. And it's not because the dollar is a worthless thing. It's because the dollar is more prized than anything else out there, and it's being hoarded in such a way that it's no longer available to them. That's the major problem with it is, that's the major problem that most people are finding out there, is that it's not necessarily that they want to get out of the dollar because they don't like it. They're getting out of the dollar because they can't find it, right? It's becoming more expensive for them. And so they just move on to another currency that they can use and hoard the dollars as much as possible. Again, that's like Gresham's law taking place right there. And I don't think a lot of people are recognizing that to be the case. Gold is the ultimate currency, right? There's nothing better than gold. It's just it. It's like anybody who denies gold being the best currency out there is not really thinking about it being what it is. Gold is the best. That's why it's hoarded and nobody uses it. If you had a pile of gold and you had a pile of dollars, which one would you end up using to buy stuff with? The gold? No, right? You would use dollars. And if you had a pile of gold, a pile of dollars, and a pile of yuan, which one would you spend first? You would spend the yuan, right? And you would hoard the gold and you would hoard the dollars. You would hoard the gold as long as possible, spend out all your fiat dollars, and then eventually, if you were forced to, you would start spending the gold. That's like That's Gresham's law working right there, you know. Uh, Color match, please. What, the power cords? That's a concern. Holy moly, man. Okay, Gustavo, we talked there. The United Arab Emirates and Saudi joining BRICS next month might tilt the tables, joining Russia, China, Brazil, South Africa. Big trouble. They can leverage oil with gold. It's not going to work. It'll work for a little bit, but it's not going to work out for them because for the same reasons that it didn't work out here in the United States or it didn't work out throughout history, is that you will end up with nations that are going to end up being the most industrious nations, acquiring all the gold, raising their standard of living, starting to import the foreign production, and then eventually export all their gold out of their nation, and then they fall into poverty. So it's not a good thing that it happens. I mean, when we hear about like, oh, they're going to switch over to gold or whatever, hey, let's do it. I'm down, man. I mean, I'm totally down for that, right? But it's not going to work out very well, and it's not going to work out for those nations. It will for a little while, like, it might even do it for a whole generation of people. I mean, who knows how long that can go on for. But as far as a everlasting economy or something like that, no. It'll create just as much problems in the future as there are today. ChatGPT reported by documenting Bitcoin revealed that machines learn the ability to pay other machines. The machines will know who's real with money based on math BTC. Okay, again, the most industrious machines would acquire all the BTC and all the rest of the machines would be without BTC, right? I mean, it's just like, if you have a fixed income, you will or a fixed currency, you will definitely have booms and bust cycles. There is no doubt about it, right? So nobody seems to talk about that. Like, wait, we should go back to a gold standard. Okay, and then deal with what? Deal with mass poverty at times from like elderly and sick and all kinds of people out there, because there's no way of really helping them when all the money is sitting in another country. We will be like Japan, stagnant for 10 to 20 years. Harry, I like your comment. Where's Harry's comment? Did I miss Harry's comment? Oh, I guess I did. She just met with them to get their story straight when they lied to the people. That's what I gotta say. I mean, you think about it, when let's see what stories the mainstream media starts to push for the next, say 2 weeks, for a month or whatever. I bet you there's going to be a common narrative that is pushed throughout all the mainstream media that is going to start firing off right now since Yellen came back from China, right? She's going to go around and make sure all the media outlets, know the same story and everybody's on the same page when they start their mass psyops with us. All right, love it that he equates crime coin with gold. Okay. Crime coin, is that Bitcoin? Is that crime coin? Why is it a crime coin? I don't get that. I mean, crimes aren't done by computer money, or by money itself. I mean, crimes are done by people. Crime coin, that's funny. All right, if countries are forced into balance of trade based currency in international trade, what would happen to the United States dollar value given the U.S. national debt against nations with low national? Okay, if countries are forced into a balanced trade, can you give me an example of a time when all the nations around the world were forced to have a balance of trade? I mean, if we could find that situation, then I would say, okay, well, maybe we could talk about that. But I don't think that's ever going to be a situation in which that could occur. There will never be a balanced trade. Like, there's going to be one nation that's more industrious than the other. No matter what, there's going to be people who are more industrious than others. It's like taking your neighbors, like take 12 neighbors, right? And you're all going to be balanced trade. You're all going to get equal amounts of money. You're all going to get equal amounts of commodities and food and all that other stuff. And then go out there and conduct business. this, but it's going to be trade equally, no matter what you do, no matter how hard you work. You're going to get the same amount of pay and you're going to get the same amount of stuff, right? That's not the way it works. There's going to be one person who's going to be lazy and one person who's going to be super, super energetic and prosperous, right? Who is going to go out there and do a bunch of work while the lazy person gets nothing in their life. The countries are going to be exactly the same way. There's no way that you can have an exact balance of trade. It doesn't work like that. Some people are just more industrious than others. Will the Japanese economy crumble? More separation between the rich and the poor? Well, I'd imagine that all economies will eventually crumble, right, over time. It's just like fiat currency can't exist forever. So, no, will the economy crumble eventually? Yeah. Please place the yellow cord into the top outlet, orange into the bottom. I got OCD. Well, I can't unplug it now because the Traeger's going. You want me to just unplug one? How about I just get rid of the yellow one? I don't need the lights on right now. Does that make you feel better? The orange cord needs to stay on top. Why? What? I don't get it. Why is that? All right. Larry Fink admitted BTC is a global asset in his interview. It's worth having some for sure. Oh yeah, no doubt about it. I am definitely a believer in holding on to Bitcoin and gold and silver, all that stuff. I am a firm believer that you should definitely have that kind of stuff in your possessions, but I don't necessarily believe that we should take it to an economy. Like we should have it as far as our currency that we use in everyday economic activity. I think that would create a situation in which that people are not necessarily prepared for. I'm prepared for it. I don't know if I'm prepared for it, but I'm at least thought about it enough that I would think I would be prepared for it. But most people think our money's backed by gold anyway, so it would be really weirded out to think that it's all of a sudden here you got gold currency and not knowing why it is that they're going through these booms and bust cycles, and and just not understanding how come governments are behaving the way they do when they're so used to them bailing them out. Cocaine is a global asset. It's worth having some in your portfolio for sure. Okay. Thank you for streaming, Simon. Well, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Here in Europe, they're banning petro gas car sales by 2030. I can't help thinking this could be a way to make money. Well, I have a feeling that there's going to be a huge push here in the United States to get rid of all the gas running vehicles out there, and people are going to fall right into that game, which would leave a whole lot of lack of gas running vehicles out there, right? As people would get rid of the combustion engines and go to electric vehicles, these combustion engines will start disappearing from the streets, from the roads, right? Now, when I think about that happening, it makes me think also the production of fuel, right? What will end up happening to the price of gas if all these vehicles all of a sudden stop using gas and using electricity instead, right? Now, granted, if you don't have anybody buying it, then there's probably not going to be a lot of people producing it, but right now, there is a lot of production of fuel taking place, and there's a lot of places that can produce fuel, right? And whether or not they produce enough of it for the time being, if you have a lack of demand coming for the price or coming for fuel, then the price of fuel is going to start falling, making combustion transportation probably the cheaper way to go. Now, whether or not that's the situation or how long that will last, I don't know, but I'm loading up on cheap combustion vehicles, right? And I'm going to start holding on to those things because you're probably not going to be able to get them anymore. And people are going to be like, holy crap, look how far you can travel for how cheap you can, when electricity ends up going real expensive and fuel gets really cheap when nobody's buying it. I don't know. Just a guess. I don't know if that's going to happen. It's kind of my idea. So I'm going to get me that Ford Explorer and I'm going to build it up and make it my awesome off-road runner or whatever it is that I won't really run it off-road. I'll just drive on the beach occasionally very casually and not beat it up at all, but it'll look like it can do a lot. That's what I'm hoping for, right? Because I want to look cool when I drive my Explorer. Alright, here in Europe, we already talked about that one. Hey Simon, have you read or listened to Steve the Keen? He too points out the drawbacks of going back to a fully gold-backed money. No, but I've probably heard some of his theories or something, at least at some point in the past. You know, you guys have to understand, like, I have taken in a lot of information from a lot of different places. And so a lot of times somebody will say, like, hey, man, you sound just like this particular person. I might have listened to him at one point and taken in part of that theory as far as, you know, what it is that I feel is going on. But then again, you know, you have to like think there is a lot of different economic theories of what could possibly happen going into the future, and some of these things are going to overlap. Like, you know, people are going to have like some of the same thoughts as you're going to have, just when you think about like the economic forces that are going to happen. So, you know, some people are going to be like, yeah, man, I totally see how a safe and liquid asset is going to be needed in order to provide the world with a currency. You have to buy the world's stuff, right? So when you have this sort of idea and you think about like, well, what will happen if we go back to a gold standard? Oh man, all these issues are going to start coming up that are much different than what we are experiencing today with a complete fiat currency and using U.S. treasuries for the safe and liquid asset. So once you switch that over to gold being the safe and liquid asset, now you got issues because you got transportation fees, storage fees, you know, all kinds of stuff. And who's going to end up paying for that? Is that me or you when we do this trade, right? When you have fiat currency and you're using U.S. treasuries, well, now you got something that actually pays you. So instead of holding on to gold, which is like cost you, right? Cost you storage, cost you security, cost you transportation, you can hold on to U.S. treasuries, which actually kind of pays you, right? Much different from the gold standard. But these are two completely different aspects of being able to do world trade. And until you kind of take those theories on and understand it in that fashion, it's like very difficult to, you know, to just say, hey, we can switch over to a gold standard. Everybody's going to be singing Kumbaya after that. Like, you know, that's not the way it's going to work. Not even, it's going to create a whole new set of problems that people are going to have to deal with. Which, no matter what, you're always going to have problems. And so, did I get a super chat? Let's go find that. Yeah, thank you so much, that dude over there, for the $4 Canadian. Very cool of you. Where was I? Let me get back up there. Okay. Banning gas-powered engines is not a free market. I don't think it'll happen. I don't think they're going to ban gas-powered engines. I mean, they might eventually someday ban the sale of gas-powered engines, but they'll never stop people from using them, right? They'll just eventually just fade away and people will stop using them on their own. Like using horses for transportation, right? Same thing. All right. What would happen if you commuted to work on horseback? Wow, that's kind of interesting way to talk about that. Okay. Indeed, separation between the market and state is a myth. Can I just say good afternoon? Deflation when people default on debts, pensions, and inflation after. Okay. So it's Matt. The reason why gold is spent last is because it's harder to spend. Well, it's also the more desired item, right? I mean, if you had a pile of gold and you had a pile of dollars, which one are you going to go out there and spend? I mean, are you going to like try and spend your gold coins? Or are you going to hoard onto those and spend your fiat, right? I mean, I don't know. Maybe people would be like, nah, screw this gold. I don't want any of it. Give me my dollars. I want my dollars. I mean, there could be people out there who are like that, but I just imagine most people who understand like currency and, you know, the gold standard and, you know, economics and even a little bit would probably want to hold the gold over fiat. I mean, I am assuming that, but I think generally speaking that would be the case. And so gold is the more, you know, prized currency in Gresham's law. You know, this is like get rid of the fiat, right? Hold on to the gold. In current climate of today's times, the amount of noise that is out there and the propaganda for the past 2 years have been in this manufactured bubble. I can only control what's in front of me. That's exactly right. You can only control the meaning that you're giving it to, right? I mean, just like anything else out there, when an event takes place, it's up to you in your reactions to it and how you feel about that. You know, whether you get fired from a job or, you know, war breaks out in another nation. Right? Now, granted, you can't give like the meaning of this war as something like, you know, as a positive event, but then again, you can talk about the ending of the war being a positive event in that at some point, the meaning behind this war is that it's going to be over, right? And hopefully be over at some point. I don't know, whatever meaning it is that you want to give it. I mean, if you look at it, it says, no, this is the beginning of the end and my life is going to be deteriorated because of it. I guarantee you will find things in your life in which that it will be deteriorated from, right? I mean, it'll just happen that way. My man Simon, how are things? Just tuned into the stream. Well, thank you very much, Eric, for being here. Things are going really well, man. Got the Traeger going. We're gonna be, I don't know it's funny. Freddie the youngest, he's really been into this Traeger thing, so he found a recipe book, and we actually did peach cobbler on the Traeger. If you can imagine that, did a dessert on the smoker. Are you bullish on North America's economy and the basic standard of living, low and middle class? I'm not necessarily bullish on, say, everybody, like generally speaking, for the American people to have like a better standard of living. Like I don't necessarily see it that way. Like what we had back in like the 50s, 60s, where single income could have a household, like to me that was like a good society. That was a good standard of living and a good way of going about it. Nowadays isn't necessarily the same, right? So like a single income can't necessarily provide enough for a household, right? So raising a family and kids and doing all that other stuff, that's not really like, I don't find that to be a very feasible thing for people to achieve right now. I'm not saying that it's not a worthy goal. I think that is a very worthy thing to try and go for. But as far as like the condition in which that people would need to be in order to have something like that, I just don't see that being a very, capable thing nowadays. What is very capable is for a single individual to prosper in an incredible way. There is more opportunity to make money now than there just about ever has been, and especially if you don't have any like responsibilities or obligations to anything other than yourself, man, you could really, really excel in this kind of environment. But most people don't really see it that way, Let's see. So I'm bullish for the individual, but not necessarily for family formation. I think that's going to be very tough, and I mean, believe me, I try to deal with that right now, it feels worthy, to do something like that, but it's also very tough, and so like, there's much easier ways of living out there. What are your thoughts on gold backs? A certificate printed and accepted in Utah that has a gold layer. Yeah, actually I have some of those gold bucks. They're pretty cool. I like them. I think it's a very neat concept, I mean, if you're not familiar with gold bucks, they almost look like they almost look kind of like a bill, like money, but it's literally made of gold. It has a gold right in it, like it has a certain weight of gold like right in the bill itself, and so you can spend it. Like you can say, hey, I got like a 1/10 ounce of gold here, or 1/100 of an ounce of gold. You can like literally spend this gold bucks. But there's no difference in that between that and any other gold standard, or using gold coins, or even using a money that has a gold backing to it. There is no difference between any of that stuff. The results of it are still going to ultimately be the same, right? Will it create a stable currency? Yeah, like a very stable currency where prices don't fluctuate very much, where your savings, like, you can earn money today and it would have the same purchasing power going into the future. I mean, I believe all those things would occur, and it would be very nice for people to have that sort of thing going on in their world. But again, it would create booms and bust cycles that people are not prepared to deal with. So is it a good thing? Stable prices are a good thing, right? I mean, savings is a good thing, but are booms and bust cycles a good thing? Well, sure, if you know how to handle them, but most people won't. And so they'll have like, hey, my life is awesome, to all of a sudden my life is shit, right? And it's, the economy that did it, that they were misunderstanding what was taking place. During the booming times, they thought it would just last forever, spending money at will, buying whatever they wanted, not realizing that they have to save as much as they possibly can, because the boom cycle is soon going to be over, and they're going to have to live off of what it is that they were acquiring during those boom cycles. Most people don't do that. They live paycheck to paycheck, and so therefore, as soon as the boom cycle is over and they're going into a bust cycle, there's going to be mass poverty because of it, right? And so the bus cycle is over and you start booming again. And that's the unfortunate case when it comes to the gold standard. You just can't, you can't stop it from happening. You can create all kinds of laws and, situations, taxes, maybe stuff like that to try and, help mitigate that problem. But in the end, it won't work anyway, because the economic forces will eventually just play out. I admire your patience. Oh, thanks. Sometimes I lose my patience. So thanks that you actually recognize that I try to hold on to it sometimes. All right. How high do you think Bitcoin will go? Bitcoin can go. It can go all the way up. I don't know. It can go all the way as far as you can possibly imagine it. There's only 21 million of them that's ever going to be produced. And I couldn't tell you how many are lost and gone forever, and how it is that it's going to be, like what kind of value you would be able to exchange Bitcoin for when everybody on the planet all of a sudden wants to try and get a hold of some. I mean, my whole goal is to acquire one Bitcoin. I have just shy of a half a Bitcoin worth of Bitcoin right now, right? But my goal is to have one whole Bitcoin. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, but if it ever comes to a point where Bitcoin is used as a world reserve currency or used for international trade, I can't imagine the value of what Bitcoin would be. It would be so much. It would be hard to even understand like what it is that, what kind of position in life that you would be in by having even one Bitcoin, right? I mean, you would have power unlike anything that anybody would ever imagine, going from rags to riches in an extreme way. I don't know if that's going to happen. Like, that's not what I anticipated will happen for Bitcoin. Right? My whole goal was to get one Bitcoin just to simply have it, right? And whatever comes from it, comes from it. But yeah, you can really let your imagination go wild when you think about what would happen if Bitcoin ends up being used as a world reserve currency. It would just be, I couldn't even imagine what one Bitcoin would do. And then me personally, I would start lending it out. I would lend out my Bitcoin as opposed to spending it, right? Because I don't want to get rid of my Bitcoin. I would just take on, the lowest amount of risk that I could and send out half my Bitcoin to come back as interest rates. BTC estimates are 90,000 to 125,000, but you never know. And what is that? Like, that's a complete arbitrary number pulled out of the air. Like, it doesn't, there's no rhyme or reason to that number when you think about Bitcoin being more about whether or not people start to try and acquire it, right? That's really where the number is going to start changing, is when people are demanding this and what it is that they were willing to trade in their life to get a hold of some Bitcoin. I saved 6 months of my mortgage and paid it in advance. Now I have so much more money thanks to you. Thanks, bro. Now I'm just chilling. Yeah, I mean, I have my mortgage paid out a couple of months right now, and I would love to be out a year. Like, if I could be out a year on my mortgage payments so that at any given month I don't have to make a payment. Like, if something comes up, there's an issue, or I need, I find like there's a buying opportunity for something, and I'm not limited to having to make my mortgage payment because I've already made it a year out. I mean, I think to me that is one of the greatest positions that you could be in. It's maybe not the best financial position, because you could probably save a lot more money by making your principal payments as opposed to paying out on your mortgage payments. But that being nimble, being able to, to be flexible on whether or not you make that payment that month because you have already made it, I think that is a much better position, at least for me, to be in, just because it allows me it frees up like my ability to make like, decisions as far as where I can go with my money, because guys like me don't have a whole lot of money yet, and we're trying, and we got to figure out what we got to do with this thing. Alright. I don't think Japan will crumble. They have a strong culture and are intelligent. Well, I mean, having a strong culture and being intelligent is certainly, going to help. But you also have to be an industrious people. You have to be a producer, right, of something out there. Whether or not you have invested properly, right? So if you had a bunch of investments and you invested that with producers outside of your nation, right, then, well, that's income coming in because you made proper investments. But again, like, how long can that last for? You have to constantly be investing, And that's really where like investing in yourself is the best, even if you're a country, investing within the nation itself to become a producer saver. That is really where I think like, nations are going to do far better, especially if we go to a fixed currency like gold or Bitcoin or something like that, is to be invested within your own nation to be producer savers of your own, right? And if you can produce and save for yourself, then you can produce and start sending it out there to the rest of the world. And that's really the best position that you could ever possibly be in, whether it's just you as an individual or living in a nation. We here in the United States, we don't produce anything, but we export a lot of debt, right? And what literally like issue out U.S. treasuries and sell them to the world and take their production, right? Their productions and savings, and we get to spend that and enjoy it. And how long can that last, right? Really. Hey, dude. All right. Peeps are crazy. Who cares about the chords? Yeah, I know, right? Kind of looks like Japanese style sushi bar. What, where I'm sitting? All right. The power grid is nowhere close to being ready for electric cars to be mainstream. Yeah, I know, and I've heard that one before, but that's just a matter of time, right? I mean, yes, the power grid in the current condition in which that we are experiencing it today would never handle the amount of vehicles that people are saying that they want on the road. That will change, right? They will find a way to have the power grid capable enough to do it, right? In current conditions, no, you're right, they won't do it, but give us some time and they will create a situation in which that it will occur. And then we will all go around going, man, can you believe how much things have changed, right? And I believe that'll happen. All right. What about hydrogen-powered cars said to be better? Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot about the hydrogen-powered cars and stuff, but, where's like the mass push for it? I don't see it, It would seem to me that would be a better way to go about it, right? I mean, you end up with like a cleaner vehicle, powerful vehicle. I don't know. Like, why isn't hydrogen? I couldn't tell you. Like, it seems to me like that would be a good concept to go with, but yet it doesn't get pushed. The government will place environmental taxes on gas vehicles to discourage their use. Yeah. Oh, I can believe that. Yeah. But again, like, how much, I mean, are they going to create it to be such a situation that it ends up being just as expensive to drive a gas-powered vehicle as it is an electric vehicle? Sure, they could probably make it that way, but, who knows? Until time will get there, we don't know. Do you think there'll be a black swan event before the stock market crashes? I mean, I don't know. Like, I would imagine that, that there's going to be a major event at some point that will change the course of history, just like there always has been. But, I mean, I can't, you can't foresee these things. You don't know what's going to happen. So, no, I don't really think about, like, what black swan events are going to come to change the world. I just wait for them to actually happen. If you have to be paid to use a currency, it has no inherent value. It's kind of true. All right. The ban on coal-fired pizza ovens in New York comes. Oh, some are 100 years. Yeah, I found that kind of to be pretty interesting too. To ban. They talk about banning wood stoves here in Oregon too, and it's just like, man, when I grew up in a house that was our only form of heat, was a wood stove. We didn't have electric heat or a gas furnace or anything like that. We literally had to burn wood all winter long to have any kind of heat in the house. And I mean, shit. I lived 12 years, probably 17. I mean, close to 20 years of my life was like that, living in a house that didn't have any, and it was just not too long ago. I mean, when I was 7 years ago, we lived in a house that only had a wood stove for heat. How do you expect potential loan defaults from commercial real estate to impact banking? Well, okay. A lot of people will look at this and say, okay, well, this is going to drive down the whole banking system. The only thing that I that I have a tendency to lean towards is that if I can think of that scenario, so have they. Right? I mean, and if they are thinking that scenario is a possibility, then they're going to do something about that scenario being a possibility, and they're going to insure against it. So just like when people ask me, do you feel safe keeping your money in the bank? Yeah, I do. Should I be? Probably not, right? I mean, it's not the safest place to go because you're going to have bank failures at some point. And people would say, why would you keep your money in the bank if you know that there's going to be bank failures? It's because I know the Federal Reserve is going to come up with a system in which that they can bail it out. They have lifeboats we don't know about, right? They have tools and ways of dealing with this banking system that are not expressed out there in speeches or in any of their documents or anything like that. The bank term funding program, that PTFB or BTFP, whatever it is they called it, that was one of these lifeboats, right, that they have. Nobody anticipated that the Federal Reserve was going to be able to come out with the Treasury and say, hey, this unusual and exigent circumstances is going to allow us to instantly create this facility, yay, that will buy your assets at face value, right? Not the current market value, what they're really worth. We're going to buy them at the full value, okay? And we're not even going to buy them. We're just going to lend you money and you can use them as collateral. That little system right there, nobody thought about that. Nobody, I mean, maybe somebody did. I didn't. I mean, I didn't know that thing was going to pop up. I just knew that they were going to have something come up, right? And I just assumed that they were going to have something come up because I could think of the scenario, right? And if I can think of it, I know one of the 150 economists over at the Federal Reserve had probably thought of it too. Right? So that's really where I come from on a lot of this stuff. Again, people say like, well, they totally missed the housing market back in '08. Right, I know. Like, again, if you listen to the words that they were using at the time, nothing within their data showed that there was a problem because they didn't have data that showed where the problem was, right? They had data that showed all kinds of other stuff, but didn't have the data that showed the problem. So now, because they knew it at the time, our data doesn't show it, and we don't have access to the data that does show it. Now they have access to that data, right? So what ended up happening was that they had a huge situation in which that there was a lot of private mortgage lending taking place out there, and they didn't have rules and regulations to deal with it. And the only thing that they have is just their data that comes in. Now they can they as an individual can point out there and say, hey, look, there's a problem right here. But as the Federal Reserve, they can't just go and have that opinion. They have to have a model that comes to them and says, here's the issues that are taking place. They didn't have that going on at the time. And so that was the major problem that they had, is that they literally had a structure in which that the data prevented them from seeing it. And if they couldn't see it, then they couldn't use it in their banking systems. They had to incorporate a way of being able to use that data, be able to use the regulations, be able to deal with it in a way that they didn't have the power for before, right? And that's really what it came down to, is that the whole situation, they were like, hey, our hands are kind of tied because we don't really have the regulations and the data to deal with the housing market crash that's about ready to come. So our points that we are looking at doesn't indicate this. And that's what they said, right? And then we had the housing market crash, and then they changed the way a lot of that is done. And it's almost as if they were like, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and let this shit happen on purpose because we don't have any way of dealing with it. And until it actually crashes and creates a problem, there's nothing we can really do to change the regulations. So when the housing market crash came, and then you got Dodd-Frank and all this other stuff coming out, and the Federal Reserve was like, yep, that's where it is. That's what we were looking for. Now we got the data to look at it, and we got the rules and regulations to deal with this. Why can't they do Bitcoin what did to gold? Why can't they do to Bitcoin what they did to gold? What part? What do to Bitcoin what they did to gold? I'm not sure what they did to gold that you're referring to there. Okay. Can't they control the price of Bitcoin just like they do gold? Well, within the banking systems, within the commodities and like the future, like the future trading commissions and stuff like that, being able to, regulate how much paper gold is out there or whatever. Yeah, there's a way that you can regulate the price of it, but ultimately that is a force that will eventually find find its way out. Like if you have enough people who are trying to manipulate the price down. Let's take silver for example, because silver is a really good manipulated price, right? You have way more paper silver out there than you have physical silver. So when it comes to investment purposes, there is pretty much all the silver you could ever want, right? For investing, because you can buy ETFs, you can buy all kinds of stuff that has silver. But buying physical silver, there's only a limited amount, right? And so when I first started buying silver, a premium, like the price over spot that you would pay would be like 50 cents, right? 50 cents, maybe on a silver eagle, you might pay like $1.50 or something like that. You'd pay a really high premium. But now the premiums on silver are way off there, right? $5 or more, or even in some cases, really crazy amounts. And now that's the physical price separating itself from the paper price. Because at some point, there's going to be somebody out there who is going to want to build a computer or a watch or a phone or something, and they're going to need silver. And they're not going to have access to it, right? Because there's only so much physical silver out there, and it's being suppressed with this paper, and so all these people are buying cheap silver, right? Well, it eventually gets to a point where a factory was just like, hey, I need to get some silver, and they're like, there's none to be had, right? And so it's just like, well, I need it. I will pay any price. And so you might have a paper price and the paper manipulation price at $20, but this factory will pay $100, right, for that physical silver, because they need it in order to build their product, and there's such a small amount of it going into their product that they're willing to pay a high price for it. That situation right there is when it will break loose. But until then, who knows? Like the demand for silver from investors is very low. Right? Not a lot of people really even care about holding on to physical silver, or let alone investing in silver to begin with. I mean, I talk to people all the time, and very rarely do I find anybody who is just like actively trying to pursue the acquiring of silver or anything else out there. Most of the time, they're just trying to fill up their stock portfolio or their retirement portfolio. Hit that like button. Yes, please. Don't lend out your BTC. That's how Celsius and other exchanges went under. No, I'm talking about like once it achieves a world reserve status, like if it actually is part of our banking system, at that point, that's what I'm talking about. Like I would be one of the major banks out there, right? I would be like a JP Morgan or something like that. That's what I'm kind of talking about. That sort of level. Because if you only have, you think about it, how many BTC actually exist out there? Even like right now, considering how many are just gone forever, right? That doesn't leave a whole lot of them out there. And if you have 1 million people out there, or even to say, whatever, half of it, you got 10 million people out there who own one Bitcoin, right? How much Bitcoin is going to be worth considering the 7 billion people on the planet, right? It's going to be insanely valuable, like insanely valuable. And it's not a matter of like, hey, I want to loan out my BTC so I can have a retirement fund. I'm talking about loaning out BTCs to entire nations, right? And being world leader kind of shit. Like that's the type of thing that would come from it. Now, I don't foresee that happening. Like I don't think that's going to take place. But that's the kind of position in which that I would want to be in if I had a BTC, right? Okay, what these things are? There we go. Okay, what do you think about creating a commons and controlling the rate of harvesting these resources so nature can replenish? Thanks for all the great content, Simon. It sounds like a perfect society that will fail. I don't. You can try and create rules and regulations that'll get people to behave, right? But ultimately, when you do that, you create a situation in which that people can then exploit the situation and benefit through themselves. And so, a perfect society doesn't exist. And although it sounds great, I don't think it would be lasting, right? And that's, it's just the way it is. We can try for it, but again, how much rules and regulations and manipulation within the people's behaviors would have to take place. You'd have to tell people, hey, sorry, you've had enough, right? And people are like, no way, man, I want more, right? What's enough? Who determines what enough is? One Bitcoin is trading at 30,000 real gold 19. Thin air versus an active product will be the biggest rug pull ever seen. Or are we living in a time where nothing is everything? I mean, okay, if you're trying to compare the two, right, Bitcoin to gold, all right, if you're trying to say which one is better, all right, well, that's pretty easy to determine, right? Because here you have two situations. You got gold or you got Bitcoin, all right? Gold has been in existence for 5,000 years, has proven itself time and time again that there is no chance of default. There's zero chance of it being worth nothing. There is always a demand for it. And then you got Bitcoin, which is a computer entry. Right? Kind of does the same thing that gold will. It'll transfer wealth from one place to another. It's very similar in a lot of things. Here's the problem. Bitcoin cannot exist without gold. Right? If gold disappeared from the earth, was gone, Bitcoin would too, right? Because you need gold in order to have the infrastructure that we even have, right? I mean, when it comes to even the communications and stuff we have, little gold components is the reason why we have a lot of what's going on right now. And if it was to disappear, so would Bitcoin. So therefore, gold can exist without Bitcoin, but Bitcoin cannot exist without gold. Therefore, gold is better, right? So if you're looking for one to be better, gold is better. Gold is better than anything out there when it comes to currencies. You know, I mean, for personal holdings and stuff like that, when it comes to doing commerce and international trade and what the economic forces will occur, if you have a gold standard, that is not necessarily the greatest thing in the world, right? It can be for those who understand it, right? But it's not going to be for those who don't understand it. Those who don't understand it will end up living in poverty. You know, right after they have a booming cycle, they won't understand why it is that everything is failing. Is there any info on FedNow and its full implementation? I mean, I talked about the FedNow 2 years ago, right? I did video on that talking about how the central bank is setting up the digital currencies and all that. This is definitely happening. There is zero doubt in my mind that we will be switching over to a central bank digital currency. It will take time, right, to pull the cash out of the system. It's going to take, who knows, like an entire generation of people to convince them to not use cash and to switch over into an entire central bank digital currency. It's not what people are thinking it's for, right? A lot of people think it's all about control and all this other stuff, and yeah, that's a huge aspect of it. I mean, that's a major part, right? But the biggest issue with it is that once the interest rates start to go down again, right? We have elevated interest rates right now, and people see them staying up forever. That's not the case, right? I mean, that's not going to happen. At some point, the interest rates will come down. And when they do come down, they may even have to go into negative territory. Or maybe if not this time, they will at some point in the future need to go into negative territory. If that is the case, they are going to have a very difficult time. And when I mean they, I'm talking about the banking system, is going to have a very difficult time trying to operate in a negative interest rate world while having cash in the system. Those two will just not work out very well, because people are not going to be accepting of a negative interest rate. They will pull all their money out of the bank in cash and put it into the mattress, and they know this. The banking system knows this. So that's the whole point of having a central bank digital currency, is to try and have a system in which that the money cannot leave the banking system. It is stuck there, right? It will always be there. It will never leave because it's part of their system. It's like the physical cash can't be removed. Now, in order for that to occur, right, for the cash to be removed, they literally have to convince the people, hey, you don't want cash. Right? And the reason why you don't want cash is because we are going to charge you to deposit it, and we're going to charge you to withdraw it, and we're going to make that such a nuisance that the stores and everybody else out there will then start charging you to use cash, right? They're going to charge you more than if you just use the central bank digital currency. And so this discouragement of cash use is going to go through an entire generation, to a point where people are just like, outside, the next generation will come and look at cash as a horrible thing that actually deteriorates your life instead of enhances it, right? And once that occurs, then we'll be on a 100% fiat currency, or not 100% digital fiat currency, as opposed to having like cash in the system. And that's really the way I see it. Now, how they integrate that into the people to convince them to do it, I mean, I think it's really going to come at a crisis situation, right? Whereas, like, all of a sudden people are starving or something like that, and they're like, oh, yeah, you need some food? Well, here, accept this FedNow, right? Accept the FedNow account, use this central bank digital currency, and we're just going to go ahead and load your card up with all kinds of funds, go down to the store and use it, right? And people will be like, thank you very much, I'll take it, right? And that's in my opinion, that's how they're going to get the people into using it without question, is that, you know, they're going to say, hey, you can buy a bunch of food with it when you're in a crisis situation. And then the other is that they're going to deter them from using cash by charging them. And then once that all occurs, then all the crazy, like, all the control and the manipulation of the people and stuff like that can start taking place. But until, like, everybody is, like, out of cash, they're not going to mess with the people in such fashion. In fact, I would even assume that they would allow like black market transactions, drug deals, stuff like that to happen, and nobody's going to get in trouble for it, because they want the people to use it, right? They don't want to say, hey, if you use this, we're going to bust you for your illegal activities, so everybody go and use it right now. Everybody'd be scared as hell. They'd be like, no way, I ain't touching that stuff, right? You know, I don't want to accidentally commit a crime and you're going to know about it. But if crimes could be committed and nobody cares, like you can use cash and commit crimes, nobody cares. Well, I mean, people care, but they don't, like, you know, there's nothing that can really be done about it, because you can't trace the cash necessarily in that fashion. It's an anonymous currency. If people feel that way about the central bank digital currencies because they have been committing crimes or doing black deals this entire time and nobody ever got in trouble for it, then they would just assume that you can do it, right? If nobody gets in trouble for it. Once everybody's on it, then you can start turning the screws. Fixed currency would constrain government and, more importantly, coming up with the next emergency. Gold and BTC are not comparable. Why do people think you can only choose one? Well, no, they are, right? They are comparable. There's a lot of differences. There's differences and there's comparables, right, with it. And, you know, to say that they're not the same in any way, that's not true. They are the same in a lot of ways. They are very different in a lot of ways as well. But as far as their interaction with the economic forces that will come from it, I have a feeling that those would be very similar to each other. Bitcoin and gold would be. There would be some differences in the fact that Bitcoin can be transferred, right, really easily, and gold couldn't, right? Gold has storage fees. Gold has, you know, security issues. Gold has transportation fees. There's all kinds of stuff that is associated with gold that wouldn't necessarily be associated with Bitcoin. But as far as the fixed amount of currency, the transferring of wealth, stuff like that, those things would be very similar with the two. All right, what sign is there of improvement or plans of improvement in the power grid's ability to support electric cars, replacement of gas cars? Base load power is required to do that. Okay, I'm not, I don't know, man, I'm not some scientist or an inventor or anything like that. But the idea that, you know, right now, okay, here, for example, I'm reading articles about there's times during the day in places like Germany where you'll actually get paid to use electricity because they produce so much electricity, right? They have an overabundance of solar farm powered electricity to the point that they actually have to shut a lot of this stuff down because it produces too much power. And then they keep the coal power plants running because it's a lot harder to fire up the coal plants again than it is to shut down the green energy. So here they invested all this money into green energy, produces so much power that it's an overabundance of power. They actually have to pay people to use the power. And then when they do, like, end up to the point that they have to do something about it, they shut down the green energy and keep the coal going because it's harder to fire the coal back up when the time comes that they need the demand for electricity again. So the situations are coming up in which that the power is being produced in a mass quantity. Now, whether or not that's going to be able to be provided to the entire world, that's another story, and then we are talking just a small section of this, you know, overabundance of power. I mean, it's just in a particular area. But could that situation grow? Yeah, why not, right? I mean, there is a demand for solar panels out there, and I see them popping up more and more every day. So whether or not the power grid could handle it in today's I don't know, right? What will the future be like when everybody starts moving into solar panels or something like that, where all houses are just automatically built with them or something? I mean, what kind of environment will we be in that situation? I mean, it's hard to tell, but I I am of the belief that necessity is the mother of invention. Okay? And just because it doesn't exist today doesn't mean that it won't happen into the future. So I don't know what it is that's going to be done. I'm just saying that things can be done and will be done. I mean, nothing will stay stagnant, that's for sure. Why did markets jump after the interest rates were increased last week? We kind of talked a little bit about this before, and now I can't tell you exactly, the reasonings behind all this, but I would assume that it has to do with the return on capital investment. Okay? So, if you, and this is again, like, you have to kind of think about it in a way that is like much counterintuitive to what you would normally anticipate. When you have, like, all of a sudden people have money, right? Just imagine, it doesn't matter where it comes from, all of a sudden you just have this money. What do you do with it, right? Well, you go start spending it into the economy, right? So when we got the stimulus packages, people went out there and started buying a bunch of stuff with it. Okay. So here we've had interest rates elevated for, some time, not huge, like over a year, right? Around a year that they've been elevated. People have been putting money towards cash investments, right? The return on capital investments have gone up. Before you would, invest in treasuries, you were lucky to get, 1%. Well, now you can get like 5%. So it's a significant amount of return that is coming from capital investment that is taking place now. So when it comes to this capital investment, when you get the return, now you got the cash, from your investments. Well, what do you do with this cash? You spend it into the economy, right? You can reinvest it back into what you had, or you can spend it out there on stuff. Well, once you have it, what do you spend it on? Well, you go out there and buy stuff. Well, that supports the corporations. Or you can go out there and invest it back into the stock market. You see, this return on capital investment is now starting to support the economy in a way. Now, I'm not saying that's like the main reason for it, but it's something that had driven the deflationary scenario for the last, decade, is the low capital investment, or the low return on capital investment. So as interest rates were near zero, you could invest towards, U.S. treasuries and get no return for it. That doesn't give you any money to reinvest back into the economy. It doesn't give you money to invest back into the stock market. So this is really one of the reasons that I feel the higher interest rates is actually better for the economy, in the sense that once you get the return on capital investment, then you can spend that money back into the economy again. Now, whether or not that's the reason why we had the stock market go back up, I guess that's anybody's opinion, but it seems to me to be fairly logical, in the sense that we had a deflationary scenario with low return on capital investments, as people just didn't have any return on it to spend back into the economy. Now we have a return on capital investment that we can spend back into the economy. The only thing which would bring back manufacturing to the United States would be tax breaks or tax-free on U.S. manufacturing companies. I don't even think that would do it, right? I think it would do it short-lived, but there is always going to be somebody out there. The United States manufacturing has pretty much left, and it's not coming back, right? The only way that you could really bring it back is if you were to take less pay, lower your standard of living, right? Stop buying stuff, right? You couldn't buy anything because your manufacturing of your stuff would have to get exported, right? In order to bring new money in. Because if you don't bring the new money in, then we're going to start falling into poverty, because we brought new money in by the issuance of debt. So now if we want to bring in new money by the issuance of manufactured goods, we got to stop issuing out debt. We got to start selling these manufactured goods to the rest of the world. So in order for manufacturing to come back to the United States, you have to lower wages, you have to lower standard of living, you have to be more competitive than the foreign competition out there. I don't see that happening, right? I don't think that's going to take place. Now, some of it could, like you could bring some back, right? You know, and I'm not saying that that's not going to happen, because there is already like the whole de-risking of getting away from China means that you have to bring supply back to the United States, or bring it closer than what you have had. But again, like, can you find manufacturing here to be as competitive as, say, manufacturing in Vietnam, right? It's not going to happen, right? You can manufacture the highest quality stuff and be competitive, because there's not a lot of people who can build the highest quality things like we can. But when it comes to just daily stuff out there, just the plastic crap, it's going to be far cheaper to manufacture in another foreign nation than it is in the United States. And if we don't want to buy their stuff, then we have to lower our standard of living. And that's ultimately what's going to come from that. I just don't see any other way. XRP in Iraq, dinar fixed the economy. I doubt it. All right. I think that's the next black swan. Bank failures, commercial real estate will start it. BTC, FedNow, navigate interest rates. I mean, if that's the case, then I would imagine if it's bank failures that are going to happen, like these from commercial real estate, then I would imagine the credit default swap, insurance policies that are covering all this are probably going to end up needing to be bailed out on top of it anyway, and then that'll recapitalize the banking system. Now, again, like, I don't know if that's going to be the case of it or not, but if we can think of the scenario, then I'm sure the Fed has already, and they probably got a corporate debt lending facility for bailing out commercial real estate or something like that. I mean, we don't know what tools that they have in order to deal with that yet. So once it occurs and we start seeing the results from that, and how the Fed and the government react to it, because they know they're not going to just let them fail, right? Like they should just let them fail, but they're not going to. It's not going to be the case. And so what it is that they plan on doing, who knows? But I would imagine that they'll probably come up with some sort of lending facility and start, buying up the toxic assets and recapitalize the banks again. Bitcoin is more decentralized. Bitcoin is more traceable. Derivatives equal IOU. New bank laws, more control, they win. That's right. It was like, hey, we don't have the rules and the regulations or the data to deal with this housing market crash of the '08. So let's just go ahead and let it crash. We'll buy up all those toxic assets, the Federal Reserve, right? Buy up the toxic mortgage-backed securities, and you all go and figure out what it is that you need to do to give us the power that we need to prevent this from ever happening again. Right? And it occurred. That's what they got. All right. 1 EMP away from Bitcoin to zero. Bitcoin is traceable, but there are ways to make it more untraceable. Problem is they make this kind of semi-illegal, but it shouldn't. Yeah, I mean, everybody, I don't know, like, I do in retail sales, right? I mean, I literally stand at a till and I take people's money. And most of the time, most people very rarely deal in cash, right? Almost, I would say 70% of the transactions are done with either accounts or credit cards or debit cards or something like that. Very rarely does anybody use cash. And really, if you're under 30 years old, almost never. It's only like people who are 30 and older who actually use cash. Everybody else is using cards, especially if you're like in your 20s, like almost exclusively do they use cards. Very rarely do I see anybody in their like 20s using cash. At least in from where, from the retail end of things that I do. I work at a hardware store, so it's different. Hey Simon, what crypto exchange do you recommend and what type of storage or wallet? Now, I get this question a lot. I have lost cryptocurrencies due to the fact that I had misplaced my private keys and didn't secure them properly. So, I mean, the ultimate way of securing your crypto is by being in possession of your private keys. Right? Now, with that being said, I store most of mine at Coinbase, right? Now, I know a lot of people are going to be rolling their eyes and shaking their head saying that's a terrible thing to do. You're putting your money with, or you're putting your crypto with a third-party claim. Yes, I am, right? I am definitely doing that, and doesn't exactly sit very well with me that that's the case. I would much rather have it with a.
I'm
Yes.
just gonna back on the label.
What's that?
I'm just gonna back on the label.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Um, so although like there's much better places to store it and be secure, like to put it on a hard wallet or to secure your private keys or something like that. But I personally have been with Coinbase and using Coinbase account for pretty like I think 6 months after they opened up accounts for people to for people to open up accounts. I think I've had an account with them since then, right? I mean, like almost since the very beginning. And although there's been times that say like I couldn't log in for a particular reason, there was like the website was down. I've never been so concerned that I would not be able to get my crypto back out of them again. I have had crypto stolen from me from a crooked exchange called Cryptsy. Like I sent them a bunch of Bitcoin, was flipping cryptos over there at this exchange called Cryptsy. This guy Big Vern, he stole it all. Right, one day you just couldn't log in, and then all our cryptos were gone. There was class action lawsuit. FBI was involved and all that other stuff. So I've had that experience as well. But personally, I keep most of it at Coinbase, and I feel fairly comfortable doing that. Now, when I do say that I don't keep all of it there, I do have like a bunch of Litecoin sitting on a Litecoin wallet, a loaf wallet. I had Abra, but Abra just recently changed the way that they're for their United States customers. So basically, I wasn't allowed to have I lent my Bitcoin to Abra and was getting an interest off of it. It was like a 2% interest rate. And they basically said that you had to be an accredited investor in order to have this type of account. And I had to move all my BTC out of it. And since that was the only real reason why I was using Abra, I just pulled pretty much all of it out of the Abra wallet and sent it over to Coinbase. So I no longer am using Abra because they just simply won't allow me to collect an interest off of it any longer. And it wasn't a lot. I just had just maybe $1,000 worth of Litecoin and Bitcoin collecting an interest with Abra that I have now pulled out of there. So pretty much most of it I keep with Coinbase. All right. Cars with batteries are dependent on the grid, which leads to people back to a centralized system of power plant. Solid oxide fuel cells can run on ethanol, so anyone that can make alcohol can. Interesting. Look at your Japan, it's nothing but rules and regulations. That's the kind of society they want. Make energy. Some people think the ethanol production on this scale will impede the space to grow on the scale, but we can farm the oceans to grow ethanol. BTC will make you more money though. Alright. On Jada? How's that? Alright, depends on what you want to buy. Coinbase, easiest. Hangum, One Key are decent. Love the shirt, Simon. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, check it out. On the back, let me see if I can show you guys. And it's got the dice. You let me know. So yeah, go buy a T-shirt, guys. Support the uneducated economist. Let's see here. For your information, huge crypto tip here. Caspa, next generation BTC, decentralized, fast, cheap scales are likely will be the mass adoption change. BlockDAG, not blockchain, next generation crypto. I steal at only 0.025. Whatever. I mean, I'm not trying to knock your crypto or anything like that, but there's so many of them out there or whatever. I just don't see anything that any of these other crypto coins are offering that Bitcoin can't do already or won't be able to do into the future, right? I mean, I just don't see it. Now, I mean, granted, I'm not a computer whiz, and I'm certainly not no crypto geek that a lot of people are. But that's kind of what I see happening out there, is that there's really anything is just a lesser of what Bitcoin is. Right now, capital investment in what? In anything that has a yield, right? So you think about it, like during the pandemic and the setting up of the special purpose vehicles and the idea that the Federal Reserve was going to be buying corporate debt, right? The return on capital investment in a corporate debt went to zero. Like it was like in a lot of places it went negative, like literally negative corporate debt. Can you imagine that? Like why in the world would anybody even want to hold on to a debt that is going to pay them back less than what they had paid for it? It just didn't make any sense, right? Unless you had anticipated that the interest rates are going to go down into the future, you'd be able to sell that off for a profit. Now, what ended up happening is that as the quantitative easing was kicking in, right, and the Federal Reserve was buying up a mass amounts of U.S. Treasuries, which was driving the prices up and the yields down on them, the fixed income investors, believe it or not, there are people out there who want to put money towards something that has a guaranteed return to it. And, it's not just whether or not the price of that item is going to go up, but they want to have something that has that return, right? Something like a rent, right? So if you lend the government money, you are getting rent back in it in the form of an interest payment. So when you have the interest payment that they're making so low that the return on capital is negative, right? Like even if it had a positive return of 1% and you had an inflation expectation of 2%, now you got a negative return of 1%. So the capital investment had gone negative. It was in a lot of places. So like there was no return on capital. And if you don't have a return on capital, how are you going to spend that back into the economy again? You can't, right? There is no spending it back into the economy. And that's a deflationary scenario that is occurring within it. So again, the return on capital investment occurs when the interest rates start to go up. Now, even again, like with the corporations, these corporations, like they were feeding on this idea. Like the fixed income investors were looking over at like, the return on treasuries going, no good, it's negative return. Where do we find any kind of return on our capital? And they started seeking it out in the corporations. They started getting into junk bonds and stuff like that to try and get that return. And again, that started driving the yields down on everything out there. Everything started coming down on yield. And so as they were fighting for it, trying to search for it, they kept bringing them down. Like even just the sheer act of reaching out there to try and get a hold of yield was bringing the corporate debt yield down, And it was creating even more of a situation in which that return on capital investment wasn't doing it. Once that ended, right, and these corporations, the yields on the corporate debt started going back up, and the zombie corporations who can't handle it, right, they're rolling over their old debt into new debt just isn't feasible for them. Now they're going bankrupt. Those who actually can have a return on, who make their payments, they're finding that, the investors who are investing into those companies are actually getting a return on their capital, which is something that they hadn't experienced for a long time or was very difficult. The only manufacturer assembly in America that will make it maybe are high value items. For example, a lot of Japanese vehicles are assembled in America. There are also all the polymer plants. Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's not necessarily the items themselves, right? Because we do have a lot of stuff, and we do manufacture some good things, like stuff that blows other people up, but sad. But anyhow, we do make a lot of quality things that are out there. Just look at the trade deficit. That's the problem, right? Is that we end up importing a hell of a lot more stuff than we export. And so even though you build a lot of quality things, you have to export more of it than you import of other things. And that's just not even close. So I mean, we're such an importing nation and not an exporting nation, unless you're talking about debt, that is just going to be you have to cut back on all the things that you purchase. That means lower your standard of living and then work twice as hard to produce things to sell to other people. That's the only way to really fix it. Nobody's going to do that, right? Nobody wants to lower their standard of living. Right? Nobody will voluntarily say, okay, I'm going to sell my nice house and I'm going to go live in a little shack. I'm going to sell my nice new car and I'm going to ride a bike, right? Nobody's going to do that. I mean, some people might, but most people won't. All right. What's your thoughts on Russia and Iran's new BDC currency backed by gold. It won't. It won't work, right? I mean, it'll work for a little while. People will be interested in it because it's going to be a stable currency that they can use, but it's not going to work in the sense that it's still a fixed currency. And what will end up happening is the most industrious nation out there will end up with all the gold, right? While everybody else is going to suffer in poverty from it, right? Because they won't have any currency left after they have sent all their gold over to that particular nation. That nation will then increase their standard of living, start importing foreign production, and they will have to export all the gold out, and they will eventually find themselves falling into poverty as well. So it's not, I mean, I'm not trying to say that it's not going to happen. What I'm saying is that it's not feasibly going to work over the long run, right? Because it's going to be the same economic forces that are going to take place that have always taken place with the gold standard, creating booms and bust cycles, right? And it's not like it can't be done, right? It's not like it can't be done. So is it going to happen? Yeah, it could. I mean, it very well might happen. But the results from it at the end of the day, right? Not at the end of that day, but at the end of a generation of people who whatever are going to find themselves in a situation in which that they are not as pleased about having a gold standard as they once thought that they were going to be, right? Will it create stable prices? Yes, that it will do, right? And you won't have the fluctuation in inflation like we are experiencing today. But the booms and bust cycles that will occur from it will be very, very devastating to people, and they just won't know how to deal with it. So again, they can set it up, but is it going to work? No. I mean, really, if they set up a gold currency, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to find a lot of people who will be in demand of their currency to hold on to it but not use it, right? So what good is commerce if they don't use the currency? It's not. It won't. People will be like, no, you got this gold dinar thing. I ain't gonna use it. You want dollars? Because I'm gonna hold on to my gold, right? And you can use these here dollars because Gresham's law says that bad money will chase out good, and gold is good. Fiat's bad. Fiat will get used, and gold will get hoarded, right? And it won't be used. It will actually fail on. I mean, it'll work for a little while, right? I mean, people will show evidence of how well it works and all kinds of stuff, but over the long run, the economic forces will kick in and people will fall into poverty. All right. What, is nobody talking anymore? Are we done? No more comments? All right. Go back up here to the top again. Cool t-shirt. That's the last comment? Are we all done with comments? All right. Nice show. Well, thanks. All right. Anheuser-Busch stock is Bud. Well, I like using Altria. I buy Altria, Anheuser-Busch, Marlboro cigarettes. I think they just recently got it out of Juul. I think they were doing the whole, non-actual tobacco products, the vaping products and stuff. They're into some of the cannabis kind of things as well, although I'm not a big fan of cannabis stocks. I never have been. The major thing that I found with cannabis, as far as the stocks or investment into cannabis, is that anybody can grow it, right? I mean, it doesn't take any kind of real special talent to grow weed. Now, it does take a special talent to grow good quality abundance of weed, but I've known guys who have taken some seeds, throwing them out behind the shed, pretty much forgot about it, and then actually grew killer weed from it, right? I mean, it was just it doesn't take any kind of real talent to do it. It's just a weed, right? And so when you have things like beer, right? Beer is a good example of it because here in the Pacific Northwest, brewing beer is a very popular hobby, right? And everybody around likes to brew their beer and say that they brew really awesome beer. And you can tell somebody how to brew beer, right? You can have the best brewer in town give instructions in exactly how to brew beer, right? Step by step, right down to a T, exactly how he does it. And no matter how hard you try to follow those instructions to the exact way that that brewer brews beer, your beer will not taste the same as that brewer's beer, right? It will be different. Same thing with somebody who is, making wine or crafting anything like that, right? Is that it takes a certain talent and skill of time in doing that in order to do something that is really good, right? But when it comes to growing wheat, just about anybody can do it. So when you have somebody who has a skill that then has a value to it, and then you have something that is just illegal, that makes it valuable, right? Because that's really the only thing that made weed have any kind of value, is the fact that it was illegal. And if you make something illegal, that is something that somebody wants, and you make it illegal, you're going to put value on it. I mean, think drugs, sex, guns, right? All this stuff, right? It doesn't matter what it is. If it has some sort of like value to a person, right, and you make it illegal, you're going to cause the value to go way up. It doesn't even have to have any kind of real value. Like weed doesn't have any value to it, right? I mean, I guess on a medicinal aspect of it, it does have some value. But the fact that the only thing that it really does is get you high, there's no value in that. There's nothing there, right? And so when you have something that doesn't have any value, that is something that somebody wants, the only way to actually give it value is to make it illegal. Otherwise, it's worthless. And we're finding that out here in Oregon. I mean, in Oregon, weed practically spills out on the ground, right? Nobody really cares. It doesn't have any real price tag to it. The only thing that really has a price tag to it is processed, like, the concentrates or the edibles, like those things, or if it's just absolutely killer, like it has to be really, 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 really good, right? And then those three things, you can actually have some sort of money that you can make off of weed. Other than that, it's worthless. No use whatsoever, period. Right? And you can find that out. Just look at the marijuana stocks. They suck, right? Nobody wants marijuana stocks, right? And yeah, you look here in Oregon, everybody smokes weed, and nobody cares if like I said, it gets spills out on the ground. Nobody cares. All right. Let me get back up here. Okay. Copper pennies and nickels are my level of hoarding. Hey, copper pennies, I do the same thing. I mean, again, I work a retail till, like at work, and I look through the change and I pull out all the copper pennies and I swap them out for zinc pennies. I got a cup on my desk that's full of copper pennies that I bring home once it's filled. What's the most weed you can possess in Oregon? Well, in your house, I think it's a 1/4 pound, and out there in public, you can have an ounce on you. And then I forget how much on concentrate, like, I don't know, it's, 4 or 5 grams of concentrate or something that you can have on you. But as far as like, yeah, you can have an ounce of weed, and in fact, that's the way it's always been in Oregon. I don't know if people knew that, but in Oregon, weed was never a crime, right? It was always a misdemeanor. The only way it was a crime is if you were manufacturing it, had it busted into for distribution, like you were planning on selling it, if you were driving while smoking it. But just simple possession of an ounce or less was a misdemeanor. It was like a $600 fine. You got slapped on the wrist and sent on your way. Nobody lost their livelihoods. Nobody went to jail. Nobody did any of that shit, right? I mean, none of that stuff was taking place. I mean, you had to actually be breaking the law, like having a lot of it, or selling it, or manufacturing it. But the simple possession of marijuana, misdemeanor crime. Get out of here, right? Nobody cares. Are interest rates going to continue going up? I believe that they are probably going to increase the interest rates a little bit more, but I can't imagine them going like dramatically higher, like going to 10 or 15% or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen. But I could see them, like, the Fed funds rate maybe going up to 5.5 or even 6 or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised by something like that happening. Now, honestly, if you had asked me that like 2 years ago, I didn't think that the Fed would ever be able to get the Fed funds rate beyond 2.5%. Like I thought at 2.5%, the condition in which that the markets would not be favorable for them to continue on ever higher. But I was absolutely wrong about that. They have definitely moved on beyond the 2.5%. With that being said, we also have to understand that there is a lag to the economy from the time that the Fed raises rates to the time it actually impacts the economy. And generally that's anywhere from 6 months to a year. So even right now, as you know, the Fed funds rate are at 5 to 5.25 or whatever it is, or whatever it's going to be, it's not that is affecting the economy. The economy is being affected by the interest rates that were at 6 months ago to a year ago. And they said like a lot of that lag has shortened up because what they do is they put out the narrative, they put out the what do they call it? The signaling. I like this. The signaling. That's the credible threat that they put out there. This signaling or this credible threat that gets the markets to behave in a way that has them anticipating what the Fed is going to do, so that when the Fed does act, the markets and the investors and everybody else have already conditioned themselves and put themselves in a position that once those rates move, it doesn't create any kind of shock and awe event to it. So that's the whole point of the signaling. And by signaling, they're actually drawing that lag time from the time they raise rates to the time it actually impacts the economy. They have shortened that lag time up by quite a bit. So what used to be what they would say be anywhere from 6 months to a year or more for the lag to actually from the time they raise the Fed funds rates to the time it impacts the economy, they say that's shortened up quite a bit. It could be anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to a year or whatever. But we don't know, right? We don't know exactly what that is, and we don't even know what the neutral level is either. So like before, we anticipated that the neutral interest rate, where the Fed funds rate are neither accommodating nor restricting the economy, might be at 2 to 2.5%. That might have changed now with the inflation scenario that we have, going on in the economy. That Fed funds rate in the neutral stance may be somewhere elevated. It might be at 3.5%. We don't know, right? We don't know exactly where it's at. So what should be restricting the economy right now, right, the higher Fed funds rate, doesn't necessarily happen when the Fed raises the rates. It takes time before that starts to actually affect the economy. And even now, we're seeing it that it may not be restricting the economy. Like we may not have the Fed funds rate at a level that is restricting the economy yet. It should be, right? But that lag time may not be hitting us yet. That's one of the reasons why the Fed stopped raising rates, is they want to see that lag time start to affect the economy in a way that says, oh shit, we might have made it there. We might be at a point where we are now neutral or restricting the economy. And if you're in a restricting economy, you don't need to keep raising interest rates. However, if you put out a signal out there that you are done raising rates, the markets will anticipate this as a pivot. And they will start behaving in a way as if a pivot is occurring, which would start, doing things to the economy that the Fed may not be exactly excited about, like starts to lower interest rates on mortgages or something like that as people start buying houses, anticipating that they're going to be able to get a better interest rate going into the future. That might actually start supporting the housing market, causing the prices to go up, which is something that they don't necessarily want to occur right now. So they don't want to signal that there's going to be a dropping of interest rates. They want to signal that not only are they pausing, but maybe going into the future going up, just so they can keep the market from saying, hey, we pivoted, all right, and now it's time to anticipate what a pivot is going to look like. They don't want to signal that at all. I mean, at least that's my opinion on it from what I've seen. All right. Matt, you should look at PBR Petrobras. All right. In the melt value of a nickel is 6 cents right now. That's actual money. Yeah, and a penny is like 2.5 cents, right? So a copper penny has, almost twice the face value, if not more. Yeah, hold on to all your nickels and all your pennies. I mean, think about it. If you held on to all your nickels, right, it's worth, each one of them has 6 cents worth of metal in it, right? So you end up with all these nickels. You actually have more in metal value than you have in face value, right? And say I am just completely batshit, right? And like crazy, you're nuts, whatever. If you had all your money in nickels, not only did you protect yourself in case of an absolute crash of the dollar because you got metal value, but then if it doesn't crash, you can just spend it at face value, no harm, right? No harm done at all. So yeah, holding on to nickels or copper pennies, yeah, like there's no way you can lose, ever, you know, because it can't drop below the face value, and right now the metal value is worth above face value. So there's no losing. You can't possibly lose out. Unless you're worried about purchasing power loss, then you would lose. Is there ever a possibility of a perfect system? God, I gotta put these things on. Okay. Is there ever a possibility of a perfect system? If not, then maybe the best answer is getting people used to the best system you can find. No, there will never be a perfect system. And the reason why is you'll never be able to achieve perfect no matter what. No matter what it is. Not an economic system, not in life, not anything will there ever be a situation in which that there will be a perfect, right? Because the sheer act of achieving perfect, right, once you have gotten to perfect, would require you to maintain perfect, which maintaining perfect would then be inherently saying that there is things in my life that are not perfect because I have to maintain it, meaning that I have to exclude things out of my life that are not perfect to the situation. And if you are excluding things that are not perfect to your situation, what you are admitting is that there is not perfectness already happening here. See, it's not a matter of being perfect, it's a matter of attempting perfect, right? It's knowing that you will never get there. It's almost perfect that you were looking for. Because the sheer act of achieving perfect would mean that you have to maintain it, and maintaining it would be saying that things are not perfect, right? Like if you had a perfect society, right? We got the perfect society here. Anything that comes into the society that is not perfect needs to be ejected out. So therefore, you cannot possibly have a perfect society because you would be constantly ejecting things out of there that are no longer perfect, which would then be saying that we have imperfectness within our society, right? Therefore, it couldn't possibly be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. 95% copper pennies are 2 cents melt, real money. That's what I want to be holding on to. I'm not rich by any means, have just enough to pay the bills, but I hold real money. Hey, before I started buying silver, I was collecting copper pennies. I would collect pre-81 pennies. I mean, started off with weed pennies, but I moved into all copper pennies. I do not get rid of copper pennies. Like once they're in my possession, they are forever in my possession. Never wants to ever leave again. And I only hoard copper pennies. Now I do have a bunch of zinc pennies as well because I just keep all my change, but I take the zinc ones out and I try to swap them for copper pennies and constantly be on that kind of cycle of swapping all my pennies into copper pennies so that eventually I will have nothing but copper pennies in possession. And even quarters, I would exchange quarters for copper pennies. Have you read any Marx? I haven't. Real special seeds go for $16 each. Yeah, I don't know. You can go and get clones. You can go and get all the stuff. I'm sure you're talking about weed again, What do you think about the future of the Pacific Northwest? I love the Pacific Northwest. I do. I love the environment. I love the people. Right? I love my home. I love it here, right? I don't necessarily like a lot of the conditions in which that have occurred here, especially when it comes to the rampant homeless, that are taking place here. But I don't necessarily blame that on the political environment that is happening. I blame that on the economic environment that is happening here due to the fact that we've had such an influx of new money coming in because people have sold their expensive places everywhere else and have moved to the desirable Pacific Northwest, right? This separation between the classes has made the conditions here very difficult for people to have an average job and then make that average job work for them. Right? So this is why a lot of the conditions are existing the way they are here in the Pacific Northwest is simply because of the idea that somebody sold $1 million house in LA and came up here, bought a $300,000 house or a $400,000 house now has $500,000 to spend, so they bring all those luxuries and conveniences that they once enjoyed back home, they bring them here. It's very expensive, and it's very difficult for people to now live. And that's the situation that I blame more than I blame the politicians. Politicians are dumb. They don't really do much, right? And we can blame them for a lot of stuff. That's fine, but it's not them. It's us who have voted them in our conditions in which that we are requiring that the people behave in, right? I mean, if we, the people, are in desire of luxuries that prevent the environment from having high enough paying jobs to meet the living standards, that's not a politician who did that, right? I mean, yeah, granted, politicians do a lot of shit that create that situation, or that have a familiar idea that they have created that situation, but really it comes from the people's behavior with what they do with their money. That's what it comes down to, okay? So if you have a bunch of rich people who are acting foolishly, then you end up with situations like we have. This doesn't happen in working class towns, right? You know, if everybody had a working job that earned a living wage, then you don't have the issues that we had. But when you have a bunch of rich people who are spending money on luxuries and conveniences that they really enjoy, separating the classes, then you end up we end up in a situation like this. You can change the politicians, it won't change it. It won't change the condition, right? Caspa would replace BTC. BTC be digital gold. Caspa solves blockchain. Trilemma, 10-year project. Problem is micropayments. Dev cited in Ethereum white paper. Yeah, and again, like, I'm not trying to knock it. I'm not trying to say that it's not going to happen, right? All I guess I'm saying is just like there's a lot of people out there who have created payment systems to deal with the micro aspect of it. This might be one. Lightning Network, Litecoin, right, was the whole idea behind that, is that it was going to be faster, easier transactions and stuff like that. Obviously still not scalable to the point that, you know, you could do like a billion little tiny penny transactions. Maybe you can, I don't know, like, you know, but again, like all that stuff, I think is really going to be secondary when Bitcoin eventually, if Bitcoin was to eventually to be the currency of choice for international trade, the system that will be built around that will have transactions moving very quickly. Now, again, whether it's this particular product or another one, I don't know. Did I get another super chat? Yes, I did. Hey, Jaws, great to see you, man. $4.99, thank you so much. No wonder they are always stealing wire out of streetlights. Going to try picking crab apples this year. Any suggestions? Hey, right on. I'm not sure what to do with all them crab apples. You know, we pick apples every year and we do some canning. We make like apple butter and do stuff like that with them. But yeah, as far as like crab apples, I don't know if I ever actually processed or dealt with crab apples before. I tiled my bathroom floor with zinc pennies. Did you? That's cool. Look at Japan. They are perfect society. Almost no crime yet. Everything imperfect is thrown to the side. Yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily go to saying Japan is perfect, right? But my dad was there and he loved it. He said that everything around it was just as really wonderful. Everybody was nice. It was very clean, and you know, everybody was very polite. You know, so exact same thing in Vancouver, Canada. We used to buy weed outside the provincial law courts in the 90s. Only dealers were busted. Cops didn't care about kids buying weed in front of them. Thank you, Simon. Great insight as always. In the early 80s, we had some crazy high interest rates, sometimes over 10%. I'm curious as why you don't think we'll get there again. Now, I'm not saying that we won't get there again. And I would have to like wonder why it is that the interest rates have been pushed that far. Right? Now, you have to think, like back in the early 80s, there was a lot of things that were much different than what is occurring today. See, back in the early 80s, actually it was the late 70s, and gold was severed from the dollar. that created a situation that people were like, okay, well, if that's the case, we're going to have to find a new currency out here. And they didn't really care about the dollar anymore, right? Like, the only thing that had the dollar being awesome was the fact that it was backed by gold and you could trade your dollars in for gold. But once that, like, failed to exist, then people were like, well, screw this. Nobody wants the dollar, right? And it got to a point where interest rates were very difficult to deal with here in the United States. In fact, it got to the point where the Carter administration started issuing out U.S. treasuries that were due in Swiss francs and German marks, right? That's because they couldn't get an interest rate that was decent enough in dollars, so they actually had to do it in a foreign currency. This is how bad it was back in the late 70s. So it's a matter of like confidence and return on your investment. Right? So if people are looking at the dollar saying, you know what, not interested. You severed the gold standard. You guys are, going to print up way too much money. You're worthless. We don't want you in our life, right? Well, then the United States was like, well, do you want some German marks or Swiss francs in your life? We can do that, right? And so they did. Now, it got to the early 80s, and people were a little more confident in the United States as far as being able to make their bill payments and stuff like that, not like in the early 70s when they cut them off from the gold standard or severed the gold standard. So now people are like, okay, well, the United States will pay their bills, right? But the inflation was running so damn hot that it was very difficult to try and reel that inflation in. So Volcker, he raises interest rates way up, right? Gets them up 10, 15%, like on a U.S. 10-year treasury, it's way up there, right? So now the government has this debt payment, right, of a high interest rate that is attracting a lot of people, right? So now the world is looking over going, man, the U.S. treasuries are paying a lot, right? And they start investing into the U.S. treasuries. Since the early 80s, the only thing that interest rates on the U.S. treasuries have done is gone down, right? So you think about it, if you bought treasuries, right, with a high interest rate to it, and the yields go down, that's the bond prices going up. So if you had a bond portfolio that you have started off in the early 80s, not only were you getting a really good return on the interest rates, but every year the bond portfolio kept going up in price, right? You could sell the entire bond portfolio for a profit. And that's the way it's been for the last like 30, 40 years until now. So, do you think, okay, let me get back to the question again. I'm curious as to why you think we'll get there again, or don't get there again, right? And okay, so that's the reason why I don't think that we're going to get there again, is because the idea that back in the early 80s is that we had to try and acquire the confidence of the people to invest with the treasuries, right? Not only did you have to offer them a higher interest rate for it because they were already taking on a risk by coming to the United States, right? But we had to give them that ability, give them the want to do it. And that's where the higher interest rates came in. I don't think they need that now, right? Like, you don't need to try and acquire the confidence of the people out there. Like, they see the 5-year, or they see the 5% yield on a 10-year treasury, and they're like, hey man, I'll jump into that game, right? And a lot of people are doing that. I mean, think about how many people who talk about how bad the dollar is are saying that they have moved into like 3 months treasuries because of the yield that they can get on. These are like a lot of the same people who said that the dollar was going to crash. Jaws sent me $1.99, but then retracted the message. All right, apple honey is pretty good. I'm talking about honey that the bees made from pollination of apple orchards. Yeah. I used to have one of the biggest apple trees in the county. In fact, I think it was one of the biggest apple trees around ever, right? It was huge. And I kid you not, this thing would probably drop 5,000 apples a year. I'm not kidding you. It was huge, right? And the only reason why that tree got as big as it did is because it actually sat on a broken septic system. So anyway, kind of gross, but that's the reason why the tree got as big as it did. Right? So it was this huge, massive tree that had these massive apples to it. And I had a beehive also, and when the blossoms on that tree were like in full bloom, it was incredible. You could hear the buzzing from all the bees in the tree. It sounded like there was like multiple hives going on in the tree. There were so many bees up in there. And yeah, we produced really good tasting and lots of honey until the hive collapsed. Because I really didn't know what I was doing with these bees. I just had them, and then one day they were all gone. All right, PJ, thank you very much for the $5. The problem with LTC is incentive to 50% attack. To increase hash, you would have to increase fee. PayPal and C-Base are BTC's second layer in a. Yeah, didn't I just read recently Litecoin transactions have surpassed Bitcoin transactions? Like there's more Litecoin transactions taking place now than there is Bitcoin. I'm not positive on that, but I thought I read that somewhere. Josh, thank you for the $1.99. Pickling crab apples. I will let you know how it goes. Yeah, man, please do. I'd be very curious on that one. Do you think government securities have bottomed out? I think we're close. I've been buying government security ETFs. I think they're very close to bottoming out. I don't know if this is necessarily the bottom. I think the yields can go up just a little bit more on these things, especially if the Fed, raises rates again. I think that, we could find that the bond prices could go down a little bit and the yields go up. But as far as the bulk move, I think that's happened. I think the majority of it is, and we're somewhere near the bottom. I think there's still more room, but how much? I don't think it will be significant. My uncle does multiple of bee honey, multiple pints, I think is what he put in there. Pints of bee honey. He lives in Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Never had better honey than that. So freaking good. Yeah, and I agree. Honey straight out of the hive. I don't know what it is about processed honey or something like that, but it is a much different flavor, consistency, everything. And I guess every hive is going to be different depending on where it is that they get their pollen, where their bees are traveling for pollination or whatever. But yeah, I found that honey straight out of the beehive, out of the hive, is so much better and different. We used to break off chunks of the wax and then chew on the wax and stuff like that. All right, on exchange, yes. The use is to launder money on chain. I don't believe so. Let me check. All right. Hey, Lord Humongous. The Humongous rules the wasteland. It's good to see you up in here, man. I haven't seen you for the last few live streams. I'm glad you made it. So what are we out of comments again? Alright. Let's see, did I miss one up there? Let me go back. Wow, we all out of questions, guys? No more? Well, thank you everybody for being here. I don't know, are we all done for the day? We've been at it for 2 hours now. I guess it's probably been a fairly long live stream for everybody. Why is this not working? Come on, there we go. Here we go. Now we got some comments going. They've surged to being very close to BTC on chain because the BTC fees recently, but still less than BTC. I'm busy mining metals. My apologies, Simon. Well, good for you, man. I went and I told you guys, I don't like talking too much about it because I don't like saying where I got it from, but there's black sand out on the beaches here on the Pacific Northwest, and if you can find some concentrations of black sand, you can actually find gold, little flakes of gold inside of that black sand. And so occasionally I will go out and I'll grab some of this black sand and I'll bring it back to the house and I'll pan out. In fact, hold on. Wait 1 second. I'll be right back. So this is my little jar of gold. This is the gold that I pulled off of the beach here in the Pacific Northwest. So I'm going to try and show this to you guys here. All right. So you can kind of see it down at the bottom. See it down there? Pretty cool, huh? It is tiny, tiny, tiny little flakes of gold that are up in there. Yeah. And so that's the only place I know of around here that I can get gold. Like I've tried panning in the streams and stuff like that, but there's no real gold to be found in any of the streams. But you can find quite a bit of it out on the beach if you can find those concentrations of black sand. Yes, lots of gold in the ocean, yeah. Alright, where are we at here? Okay. Lordy Mungus, I live in my van, not a car. I'm driving, okay. Dirt fishing. Yes, lots of gold in the ocean, there is. The whiplash effect, will we face shortages this winter? I believe we are. I mean, I believe there's going to be shortages of food and a lot of other things out there right now. You know, you have to think, like, what created the shortages before? Like the shortages that we had experienced from before was due to a supply chain breakdown. It wasn't because there was a lack of stuff, right? There was a lack of stuff on the shelf, but it was a lack of transportation of getting the stuff from China to the shelves themselves, right? Severing of the supply chain through trucking, through the ports, containers stacking up. Like, remember, they were going to hire the National Guard to move all this stuff around. It wasn't like the stuff hadn't been produced. The stuff had been produced, it just wasn't getting to the shelves so we could buy it. Now we have a huge slowdown in manufacturing. I mean, take a look at China. Just punch in manufacturing in China and go in Google and look at some of the stories you're going to find from that. There is a dramatic slowdown taking place in the manufacturing coming out of China. China manufactures all the stuff that we buy. So think about it. If they're not manufacturing anything, there won't be anything to buy. There's going to be shortages that result from that. Running out of power, so I unplugged my phone so I could use the trader. I don't have another. Okay, living in vehicles saves you lots of debt notes, Nice, alright. This dude gets more done from his car than you get done from your entire existence. Oh, wow. Alright. What did Cantillon do at the end of the economic powerhouse time? Did he discuss how he did or how one should prepare for their downfall as the economy's superpower? Well, I think Cantillon was understanding the flow of this power structure, the increase and decrease to money to a state. However, this was occurring over the course of lifetimes. Like, he recognized this throughout generations of people. So it's not like an individual can prepare for an event such as this coming down the line. I mean, I guess one could, if you happen to see the shifting and changes of it from the time, like, say you're 20 years old to the time you retire or something like that, then like maybe taking that kind of strategy or theory. But over the course of, say, like maybe a year or two, I don't think that's necessarily the idea behind it. Cantillon talked about, generations of people, talking about hundreds of years passing by. And you also have to think this was a very slow time during his, like, he didn't have communications and transportation and stuff like that like we have today. So it's a very different type of economic force that we're playing out. Although the economic forces still play out, they look very differently, and the speed in which that these things occur would also be very different. But again, I think it's a very, when we get the information, a lot of times I do this myself, that when I get information in and I recognize it for like the first time, I think, oh my God, this is happening so quickly, this is happening so fast, we need to do something about it. But really, it's a very slow, drawn out process, right? I mean, it does take a long time for a lot of these things to occur, even though the data, the information that we're getting is coming very fastly. We anticipate that it's going to be moving fast, but it doesn't. It moves slow. We just got the information really fast, so we think that things are moving fast. So really, I mean, like, as far as preparing for it, I think really if you could recognize, like, if you really wanted to prepare for something, then what you do is you find the nations that are just now moving into being an industrious nation. Because what you're going to find is that the standard of living within that nation is going to become easier, right? Not harder. Like here in the United States, we have this high standard of living. It's really hard to maintain, right? Unless you are an individual who is really, like, focused on, doing a lot of different things, which is really easy to do here in the United States, it's very difficult to have like a family formation and a high standard of living. As an individual, you can have a high standard of living, but you have to do a lot of different things, which means that you really can't focus in on having a family and stuff like that. So if you could recognize where it is that the most industrious nations are going to be and move to those nations, then you would just be in an environment in which that things would just naturally become easier. I don't know if that helps. Thanks for the question, Joss. All right. Don't be rude, Fistful. Who's being rude? All right. Where is Simon? If you buy land, what would you do? If I bought land, I mean, if I had land and I was in a situation in which that I could be building spec homes, then I would probably be doing that, personally. Now, if I had land that necessarily wouldn't have the best opportunity to build and sell spec homes on them, I would hope that I had bought land that was in a position or in a spot that, give it some time, would eventually have that occurring on it, where that land would be useful for building spec homes on, or have some kind of value increase to it, to the change of the environment that is happening there, mainly like population growth. So if you saw like an industry was coming into a particular area that's going to bring a lot of jobs to it, like here in Astoria, we have this huge hospital district going, right? So that I know is going to bring high-paying jobs to it, and it's one of the reasons why all the rents and houses are so expensive here, is because we have all these high-paying hospital-type jobs that are starting to come to our area. And if you have an industry like that that's going to be growing, and you recognize that ahead of time, that would be awesome for buying land and just sitting on it, because you know that at some point there's going to be the need for houses on that land, and you'd probably be in a much better position to take advantage of that if you could recognize it ahead of time. Like, seeing where the industry is now, it's like, man, there's a lot of stuff, and then trying to buy land and go on it, you're already buying into an expensive spot, right? So you could do it. I mean, there's still money to be made and all that, but if you're going to buy land, I would look for land that is going to be valuable in the future, not necessarily valuable today. I tried panning in Maine, have not got on the gold yet. Lord Humongous, he's a bitter troll. Who is it you're talking about? Where is he? This fool. I didn't even see it. Oh, there. Oh. I see. Lord Humongous must have deleted his comments. Okay. Well, be careful, Lord. Don't just delete him just because he's a jerk. Just delete him because he's spamming or being, a real dick, All right. Nobody escapes the wrath of the humongous. Again, man, just be cool with your power, all right? We do allow, free speech here. All right. Lord Humongous, the wrath of humongous is humongous, Right, the slowdown, do you believe, with the slowdown, do you believe petroleum will get cheaper? I do, and I mean, it already, maybe not at the gas station, maybe not at the pumps, but oil has definitely gotten cheaper. I mean, we're at what, $70, $80 a barrel? It peaked out at $150. So petroleum products are cheaper today. Give it time, and it'll eventually find its way into the products that we actually purchase. But all right. Focus on John Exeter. Cantillon is old. Yeah, and for those, and I did actually. I think about Exeter's pyramid a lot. I like bringing that one up because really, that Exeter's pyramid is the reason why the dollar is going to do so much better than just about anything else out there. Is because if you think about it comes down to confidence, right? And gold, you have to have very little confidence in gold. Actually, you don't have to have any confidence in it. There's no confidence that you need in gold because gold is just an item. It is what it is, right? You have to have some sort of confidence that other people would want it, right? I mean, but that's already been proven for 5,000 years that there's very little doubt that people would want gold. So gold has no confidence, right? It doesn't need it. It's an independent item all on its own that, whether you're confident or not doesn't matter. However, everything else after that does need confidence. It does need your trust because it has a third-party claim to it, whether it's a dollar or a bond or anything else out there. And so really, when it comes to like thinking about Exeter's pyramid, you have gold at the very tip of the Exeter's pyramid, meaning that it's like the most valuable thing that you could possibly have with zero chance of default. Don't have to worry about confidence from anybody because it doesn't need it, right? None of that stuff. And then after that, you start going into the different layers of risk and third-party claims and the confidence that goes with it, right? So right after gold, you have dollars. And then after dollars, you start moving into like things like real estate, stock market, moving on up until you eventually get to like the derivatives markets and credit default swaps and all these other things, right? So right at the very tip of that of Exeter's pyramid is the gold. Right after that is dollars. Then after that, it's going to be like other fiat currencies, right? You know, whether or not it's yuan or rupees or something else. But even if you think about it from Exeter's pyramid, going from things that are the most illiquid to the things that are the most liquid, right? Gold is the most liquid item, with dollars being right behind it, being basically the liquidity, right? The liquidity of it. After that, things are going to be much more risky than the dollar and then gold, right? Which gold carries no risk. All right, nobody on purpose. Lordy Mungus, okay, the Wrath, with the slowdown, Indeed, PJ, focus on Exeter's Cantian. Okay, I'm in the plumbing trade. When I scrap copper, it's when gas is high and I get the most. It rides the market with fuel. Oh, interesting. Sam Champ, thank you for the $5. I want to live in the Goondocks with Simon. Hey, the Pacific Northwest is a wonderful, wonderful place to live. Like, I cannot think of any other place that I would want to be. The places, I mean, the environment is beautiful, the people are friendly, this is my home, this is where I want to be. And there's other places out there in the world that'll probably be better for, earning money, making, living, having a, less cost of living and stuff like that. But is it as beautiful? Is it as friendly? Is it as nice? Is it as clean? This is worth it to me. There's a lot of things that I don't like about it, but there's so much more that I do. All right. How will travel prices and leisure be affected by the shortages? Will prices remain high? I would imagine that travel and stuff like that will become travel and leisure in like luxuries. Those are not going to be important to people at all. It's going to be the necessities that are very important. Like, we've already gone through the luxury boom. Everybody enjoyed having all these new luxuries into their life, new cars, all this stimulus packages and stuff like that. Now they're going to move into having necessities being, their main priority. It's going to be very difficult to acquire food. It's going to be very difficult to have gas and power and stuff like that, especially during this monetary tightening cycles. Even though prices should come down, the acquiring of money in itself will be very difficult. So, give it time, and you're going to find that that the shortages won't remain high forever. Right? The shortages are going to kick in, prices are going to go up, and then people are going to look at those high prices and then want to take advantage of that and start moving into investment of those particular items. It's going to be the oversupply, oversupply again until we find equilibrium, and that's going to take years to solve. The first shortages came from supply chain breakdown. The next shortages are going to come from an actual missing of items that just don't even exist out there. They're not stuck on ships or in trains or in containers. They just don't even exist, right? And then that will spark people to go into investment. I think I need to plug my phone in here. Let's see. Spin this chair around a little bit. Okay, hold on, guys. I'm gonna take you for a little ride here. What's up, dude? Should I get off the live stream? I've been on for hours now. Oops, where's my? There it is. I'm trying to plug my phone into these guys. All right, there we go. We're back in and running again. Freddie's got his hoop in the background there. Make a shot for him, Fred. Alright. Did I get another super chat down there? I did. Let me see. Oh no, that was the That was the banking question. All right, not to mention commercial real estate. Yeah, we talked about commercial real estate. All right, do you believe the time the mainstream media finally gives up on the inflation narrative and focuses on savings yield would be the time to divest out of cash, pretty much sell news? Yeah, and I think that time is actually coming very quickly here. I really do think that that is the narrative that people were pushing for the de-dollarization, get out of the dollar, the whole idea. If you look at what the rich were doing at that same time, I mean, they were loading up on cash, right? So like while everybody else is out there trying to get out of cash, thinking that the whole world is going to be out of the dollar for the world reserve currency, at the same time, the rich were loading up on cash. All right. The unsuccessful economist. Oh, okay. I mean, I don't know. Considering where I was 5 years ago to where I am today, I think I'm doing all right. Yeah. Correct, PJ. Outstanding statement. What did PJ say? Okay. Advice. I do like forest land. Okay. This will be a major week for the markets. Huge sales by Friday. You're welcome. Lord Humongous, cheers. Also, there's no way that James Carroll is fake account made by that fiscal guy. BRICS are coming out with a gold-backed currency. This dude still thinks the dollar is king. Well, I don't know. I mean, we've only talked about this several times, right? I mean, if you want to go ahead and believe that a gold-backed currency is going to be the save-all to all this, then I would say go for it, man. I'm ready to deal with the gold-backed currency. Most people are not, right? I mean, I'm under the understanding and knowing about what the economic forces are going to be like if we go back to a gold standard. What it's going to do is it's going to create booms and bust cycles for the people to have to deal with that they are not prepared for, and what you're going to end up with is a lot of people who are stuck in poverty due to the fact that they are moved over to a gold standard. It's not a good thing. Now, as an individual, I think the holding on to gold is probably the smartest thing that you could probably do. But it's acquiring gold for your own possession to be out of a third-party claim. To have gold as an actual world reserve currency would be a very devastating thing to have happen, except for those who are the most industrious nations out there. So if you live in America, don't wish for a gold standard. It would be actually sending you into poverty is what it's going to do. And if you want that, then I mean, load up on gold and watch everybody around you suffer as you excel in life, right? I mean, is that what you're looking for? I mean, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I'll do it with you. Why not? You know, I mean, Lord Humongous will do it with us. He's ready. All right. They say they are, but until they do, talk is cheap. Yeah. And that's another thing that I find funny is like, you know, here this guy is giving me a hard time about like, you know, saying that I don't understand the gold standard or something. And yet here he is wanting to create a situation in which that there's going to be mass poverty amongst those who don't produce enough, right? I mean, that's what you want? Is mass poverty amongst the people with no way that the governments can help? I'm cool with it. I mean, why not? They should have been working harder for themselves anyway, you know? But that's what you're asking for. I'm not really asking for that, you know? I'm just saying that if that's the case, then let's do it, and I'm prepared for it myself. I just don't think anybody else is. Alright. Major bank derivative exposure is enormous. It won't be pretty. Is Joe gonna blame cereal grain disruptions on serial killers? Now is the time for a little house on the prairie mode. If your bank isn't exposed to it, it's most likely still exposed to someone who is. Dollar has military backing, no need for gold backing. Get at least 15 acres to burn wood and select, cut, and stream, pond, river, lake. Cereal, there you go. Have you seen military lately? James Carroll. Hey, Lumberjack, great to see you here, man. We are all drowning in what we have contributed to society. All right. All wars are fought over gold. all governments are gangs, all politicians are thieves. I will stick with UE on his thinking through current policy, etc. Well, thank you, Lumberjack Landlord. I appreciate it, man. And again, these are just opinions and ideas, meant for you to absorb, think about, use with all the other information that you're gathering out there, so that you can make the best decisions for you and your family. I think Lumberjack Landlord has made some pretty good decisions for himself and his family. So, all right, you need recession for there to be economic growth, though. It's natural and economic cycle. Pretty silly if you ask me. What about a mining farm? Is there money to be made in that business? In mining, like crypto mining or something? I don't know. Like, I guess if you had cheap access to power, they are creating mass poverty by driving out all the tech and crypto out of the U.S. Glasses here. All right. Heading to war, invest in Lockheed and Raytheon. Cold turkey is rough, though, thing. Cold turkey is a rough thing, and the world is addicted to fiat. So true, right? And that's the thing. Like, even if you were to introduce a better currency, right, than the one you have, what will end up happening is the better currency will end up getting hoarded, and the bad currency will get used into the economy. So even if you were to set up a gold currency, what you're basically saying is, I'm going to set up a currency that nobody's going to use, but everybody's going to hoard. Hey Simon, what about crossing the border into Washington to save on income tax? Any good land deals on Washington side? That's right, because they don't do an income tax over there, but they do sales tax in Washington, right? So here in Oregon, we don't have a sales tax. You know that? Yeah, the item that you, like the tag on the item that you buy is actually the price you pay. We don't have a sales tax here. So I guess ultimately what you really want to do is live and work in Washington and buy all your stuff in Oregon, right? Like, just travel over here and buy everything in cash in Oregon. Central bankers cause poverty. I believe that. I want silver, gold, copper, nickel, standard, not just gold. Yeah, but I mean, even still, Lord Humongous, I still feel that we would end up in the same situation no matter whether it was gold, silver, copper, nickel, Bitcoin. If you have a fixed currency, what will end up happening is that the most industrious nation will end up with all the money, raise their standard of living, start importing foreign production, export all their money, and fall into poverty. And it'll be that cycle happening over and over again. Now, how long that takes, I don't know. Like, what nation is going to be the industrious nation for the time being while we're alive? Who knows? But that's the situation I feel would occur from that. Do you think Bitcoin could have been created by the Fed as a way to stifle precious metals? No, I don't know. I don't think that would be the reason to stifle precious metals. I don't think it was necessarily like, I don't even know if the Fed did, create a Bitcoin, right? I mean, to take on that sort of idea, the strategy that the Fed created Bitcoin, and then to do that so that people would be out of metals or not use the metal, I have a hard time lining all that up. Like, to be this is the strategy that came from it. I would have to start with, like, the Fed created Bitcoin, which I don't think happened. Right? So, like, I would have to understand that part of it first before I can move into this is the reason why they did it. All right. Paper money is poverty. It is the ghost of money and not money itself. Thomas Jefferson. Yeah, I can believe that. All right. Only gold is money. The dollar is still backed by gold, except now at a variable rate rather than a fixed rate. No, it's not. gold is money. Dollar is not backed by gold, not by any means, right? Because then you would have to have at least some sort of component to it that would say we have a fixed amount of gold to the amount of dollars that we have out there, right? Like even if you were to do it today, it's just like, okay, so old money out there right now, it takes $1,900 to buy an ounce of gold. Well, you would find that all the gold would disappear and there'd still be dollars out there, and it would be a hell of a lot more in gold price than to match the amount of dollars that we have out there, right? So no, dollars are not backed by gold right now, okay? Because you would have to take like all the gold in the world and divide it by how many dollars, and that would be the price of gold, not one that fluctuates. And it's not even like variable by interest rates. What is meant by gold backing? That you can exchange dollars for gold. Can you exchange dollars for gold now? Yes, not at $35. Yeah, but it would be backing if it was fixed, right? If a certain amount. Like you can go out and use your dollars to buy gold, but you can use it to go out there and buy weed as well. The dollar is not backed by marijuana, right? It's the same sense that gold is not backed, or the dollar is not backed by gold. Just because you can use dollars to go buy gold, or you can use dollars to go buy weed, doesn't create the backing for it. That's not it. All right, precious metals are the only things that will extinguish a debt. All right, I stock food. China takes over the world. Fix trade imbalances. Well, again, how do you fix the trade imbalance, right? You have to have government rule. You have to have governments coming in saying, no, you can't produce that much, right? Because if you produce more of that, we would export that, and then we would start bringing in an imbalance of trade. So then you would have a situation in which that you are a hard worker wanting to produce and do better, and you would have government coming going, can't do any more than that. In fact, anything that you produce after this belongs to us, right? Not you anymore. That's the kind of situation that you would have to have in order to, to fix or to have a balanced trade or something. Hey, thank you very much, Matthew, Lumberjack Landlord, for the $10. My rents are still going up, just slower. Every small multi-family in my market is more expensive. Every unit I post, I get 15% of decent renters and 85% of the same people with bad credit. And see, like, Lumberjack Landlord has a great insight into the situation because really, there's no better evidence of money in the system than the rents and leases that are out there. And I forget how many units Matthew has, but it's quite a few of them. So he has a very broad understanding of where the rents are in his area and the demand for rents. So when you have a lot of money coming into the system, the demand for rent is going to go up, right? No matter what you do. And having that insight like Lumberjack Landlord does, whereas everybody else is saying, something like, the dollar's going to fail or whatever, he's like, yeah, well, I got people ringing my phone off the hook right now looking for a place to live and willing to pay the price, right? Which is a much different story than what other people will tell him. Thank you very much, Lumberjack Landlord, for the super chat. And if you haven't checked out his channel, he runs a great channel. My mom and my wife, they always tune into his live streams, and so I always hear him playing in the background. And we go and check it out and try and hit the like button when we can. But yeah, definitely check out Lumberjack Landlord's channel, especially if you're interested in getting rental properties. He covers all the bases. Food is money when you're hungry. Industrial countries will be crushed with 10 years by automation and robotics, even the farming industry. Again, I don't know. I don't look at like innovation like that as a bad thing. Like I never have. Anytime you ever have something that comes in to make your job easier, farming, like it will take your job away, right? There's no doubt about it. If there's a robot that can come in and do your job, it's going to do your job faster, easier, cheaper, whatever, right? Then you lose your job. But the flip side of that is, and what a lot of people have a misunderstanding about, is that this has just now freed you up to do the things in your life that you should have truly been doing anyway, right? Now, most people will look at it as like, no, I lost my pay, right? But it didn't lose your pay. What it did is it gave you the opportunity to find pay in another place or pay from another situation that is more in line with who you are, following your passions, right? Think about it from like I like using the telephone operators from back in the day, right? They used to have warehouses full of women doing switchboard operations, right? I mean, well, probably men doing it too, but it was like a lot of women doing this, right? And the switchboard operations. Then they did away with that. You didn't have to have these manuals, switching of lines. It was all done through computers, right? So you didn't have to have warehouses full of people doing these switchboard operations. They all lost their job. And everybody, there was a lot of talk back during that time that all these poor, these poor employed women are going to lose their job. They're going to be out on the poorhouse, right? They're going to be on the streets with no employment, which very well might have been the case when it first started to happen. But you have to think, what happened after that, right? Here you have, shortly after this situation, you had massive movement of women moving into career jobs, right? They became doctors and lawyers and politicians and all this other stuff. It freed them up from doing stupid work to moving into doing smart work, right? The things that they really should have been doing with their life to begin with, right? Now, I mean, there's a lot of talk on whether or not that should have occurred, but that's for somebody else to debate, right? What actually occurred is that they had this really horrible job that didn't use any kind of real talent, and it took them away from that and gave them an opportunity to actually pursue things that are more talent-based, right? And using those skills to better themselves. That's really what ends up happening from it. It takes away your loss of time, right? Doing stuff that doesn't benefit you, not mentally, physically, financially. I guess it would a little bit financially if you had a job, but it doesn't benefit you mentally or physically, right? What does benefit you mentally or physically is following your passions and doing things that are truly in line with who you are and what you truly want to do with your life. And that's what robots will do for us. It'll free us up to do what we truly should be doing with our lives. And it's not something again, it's the meaning that you put behind it. You could say robots are taking my job away, or robots are creating a convenience for me to pursue my passions. That's what, it's whatever meaning you choose to give it. All right. How many decent renters do you need? Just one per unit. Exactly. My point is no market dynamic for rentals to crash. Right. And that's, again, and this is somebody who's not again, Matthew is somebody who has been through the great financial crisis. I mean, we've talked about that. I've interviewed him on my channel and had him talk about that situation. He said it was very tough. He thought he was going to lose it all. Or at least it felt like he was going to lose it all, as everything was just coming undone. Sticking through it, being confident in what it is that you're doing, knowing that what it is that you have going on in the future is going to be the right decisions. Put him in a place in which that now he excels. And I think we should all take a lesson from that. Let's see, stock, food, pay off debt, then stock metals or buy land to hold extra money in a crash. U.S. government is the largest holder of BTC. The elegance of the white paper is only possible at a government level. Huh. Yeah, that's interesting to think about, because I know the government is definitely a holder of BTC through a lot of confiscation, right? Like Silk Road and stuff like that. Didn't they auction all that off? I thought they auctioned off the Silk Road stuff. And didn't a bunch of FBI guys try to steal some of that from the government? They were trying to steal some of the BTC that was basically illegally acquired. All right, got to get to work, but on the replacement gold thing, BTC is highly necessary improvement on the gold because it settles in 10 minutes online with no third-party risk. That can't happen in gold. No, you're right. You're right about that. It certainly has more convenience in that sense, where you can actually do a transaction with somebody on the other side of the world And once you have started that transaction, there's no government or any authority that's ever going to stop you from continuing on with that transaction. So it does have that to it, which is different from gold. But the economic forces that play out because of Bitcoin being a fixed currency is almost the same as gold, right? I mean, it's essentially the same thing. The economic environment will look a little different as far as the transactions and stuff, but the rise of the living standards of the most industrious nation will continue to happen, right? And then once they have elevated their standard of living, they will start importing foreign production to alleviate the high prices of their high standard of living. And then once they start bringing in foreign production, they will export their domestic manufacturing, and eventually they'll fall into poverty. No matter what system you set up, if you have a fixed currency like Bitcoin or gold, that will be the occurrence every single time, no matter how you deal with it, right? Unless you start having some massive government intrusion saying that you can only produce so much, you can only export so much, you can only, have all these rules to deal with the trade imbalance. That's, without that, then the natural economic forces will eventually, force people into a higher standard of living and then fall into poverty. Tough to find good renters. Only cocaine is better than crime coin. Gold is limited. Everything else is limitless and suspicious because you can settle it instantly up your nose. I'm talking about the cocaine again. Fiat currency. Okay. Uneducated Economist. Under Bretton Woods gold standard, all the dollars could not be redeemed. That is why default and revaluation happened. I know, right? And that was the whole point, is they had convinced everybody that they were going to do that. Right? They had convinced the entire world that if they held dollars, they could exchange those dollars for gold. And people were cool with it. They were like, yes, we can do that. That is so awesome. And then one day they found out that they couldn't, and they were pissed. They were like, you know what, screw you, screw the dollar, we're out of here, right? And that, by the end of the 70s, when he got into the Carter administration, he was just like, man, what do we do here? Nobody wants the dollars. Everybody's bailing out of the dollar. They're all opening up Swiss bank accounts and stuff. What are we going to do, right? Well, raise them interest rates up, man. Start issuing out treasuries in some other currency or whatever. Get people back into investing in the United States again, however you do it. So you're exactly right. It was the fact that they had convinced the world that they were going to be back in their that they had the dollar backed by gold, and then they realized that that's not the case, right? And they were very upset about that. And that's why everything started to fall apart there towards the end of the 70s and in the early 80s. All right, the cocaine found in the White House is at the HSBC cocaine or the JP Morgan cocaine. Everybody wants cocaine. All right, I have 137 units. Holy moly, man, I knew it was a bunch, right? I have a dozen people I have to say no to that every unit. I have a dozen people I have to say no to that qualify every unit. Oh, because of how many people are actually there qualified, but you already rented it to somebody else, right? So you have to tell them, I'm sorry, that unit's gone already. And there's that many qualified people out there. And see, that's what it's saying. Like, how do rents come down when that takes place? Like, you can read all the news articles in the world out there that say, like, hey, all these scary scenarios are taking place, but then you have somebody who has 137 units saying, hey, I tell you, every time I put up one, the rents around my area are going up, and there is a dozen people who are totally qualified showing up saying, hey, I will pay that rent. What does that say, right? I mean, all right. Are you always on live stream on Sundays? No, I just happen to be able to find the time here Sunday afternoons in order to do this. So the other times I've just been so busy, I just really didn't have time to do it. So, I mean, I can make it a regular thing, maybe. I don't know. I don't want to overlap Lumberjack Landlords because he does his on Saturdays or Sundays too. And I don't want to, overlap his because I know we share a lot of the same fans. Let's see here. Hey Simon, where on the Washington side near Astoria would you do a spec home? I don't know. I don't know if I would necessarily do a spec home right now. I don't know, because just simply because land prices are really expensive here, and the house that you have to build would be so big and like expensive in order to be like in competition. I don't know. I don't know if I would. I think there would be better places in the world to build a spec home, especially in the United States. But then again, I'm not a builder, and I'm not, somebody who really does that kind of work. One of the builders that I know, I would love to get him on the show. I've said it many times, but these guys, they're not like, they don't want to put them, they're not like out there on YouTube, right? They build houses, they do that kind of thing. But he's killing it right now. He's building high-end custom homes for people, and he says that his customers are willing to pay the price, and he has no problem finding them. So it's like, it depends on what market you're in, and he's building in the most expensive areas around here, building expensive homes. All right, lumberjack landlord, can you buy small multifamily for 100,000 per door in your area? No, usually it's 125 to 250 a door. What you think? He's somewhere in South America? What? Oh, I see. They're okay. Uneducated economist, robots probably won't take building trades jobs. No, like a lot of people are talking about like the 3D printer, 3D printing a house. That's kind of like a robotic way of building homes. You don't need like the traditional carpenter to do it. But I don't see any form of building out there that is going to change anything about the way that new homes are being constructed today. Like very little. The only major change that has happened to new construction over the last even 20 or 30 years has been the nail gun, right? Like nail guns really revolutionized the way framing is done, but it really just sped up production in the same exact style that they had always been building houses, right? Studs and sheathing and roofing and siding and cladding, whatever. The major change that I see coming, if there was a major change to the building style, is going to be cross-laminated timbers. That is a new style of building that really has not taken hold yet. Like it's not very popular. It's unique in a sense that not like building codes are really structured to handle cross-laminated timbers because like it's a wood construction, and so most like most city ordinances and building codes require a certain, they only limit so tall on a building, a wood building, because of like the fire departments and their ladders and how they can reach to fight a fire on a wood constructed building. So most cities have like a limit to how tall you can build a high rise out of wood. But cross-laminated timbers are going to absolutely change the way that high rises, apartment complexes, facilities like hospitals and schools, it's going to absolutely change the way that all these things are constructed. You really can have all the parts and pieces built off-site, someplace else. Bring it in on a truck, lift it off the truck, and set it right into place. So it's very low intrusive impact, like very low impact to the surrounding environment of that construction. Like if you build a high-rise building, you got like all kinds of issues around that building, traffic issues, you got material coming in, you got people working all over the place. When it comes to a cross-laminated timber industry or cross-laminated timber construct building, it is very low intrusive impact to the rest of the environment around it. But it's very slow to move right now. There's not a lot of people who are constructing out of this cross-laminated timber. But that's going to change. That's really going to change. And I don't know how long it's going to be, but you're going to find more and more full-on wood constructed high-rises and buildings. And that'll change the way that even residential construction is done, because once that becomes more popular, I think you're going to find that even doing residential construction out of cross-laminated timber is going to start becoming more popular. Where, again, like you can order the whole house and it shows up in pieces and then you just assemble it once it's there, instead of having to cut and fabricate and construct like a carpenter would do it. So in that sense, there would be a lot of robots, right? I forgot to add that into it. Like you would have room for automation to start taking place when you are just doing that kind of construction. All right. If paper fiat was made out of weed, you could roll it up a 5-spot and smoke it. Yeah, that's true. An injection of wealth is coming. Where will it come from? An injection of wealth is coming. Where would it come from? I don't know. I don't know what that injection of wealth you're talking about is. All right. From the aliens. There you go. All right. There are plenty of markets in the small multi. You can hit 100,000, usually Midwest, parts of South, or 90 plus minutes from a city. Okay, there you go. See, Lumberjack knows. All right. Yeah, in Alabama, 2 hours from the city, you'd be renting those for 300 or so. So what I'm trying to say is gold-backed currency make perfect sense in the very near future. For who? The most industrious nation. It is not going to make sense for those who do not produce and save, right? The producer savers, they will do very well during that environment because they're going to have more gold coming to them. Everybody else who is a consuming nation, they will export all their gold and they will fall into poverty. But during that time, prices will be very stable. So, I mean, that, prices will be very stable as you move into poverty. Unless you're one of the industrious nations, then your standard of living will go up. All right, I live in a heavy agricultural state. We have had self-driving tractors for years. Technology isn't the devil. One person farms 1,000 acres now. Okay? And I think the idea behind that is that there's less people earning money off of that farm because you have the tractor driving itself. And that's where a lot of people are like, feel that like this innovation is deteriorating their life, but it's not, right? Now you're freed up to go do something with your life instead of like, farming land, which you might really enjoy farming land, and that might be a bummer for you, but for the most part, most people probably want to do something with their life outside of farming land, unless you're the farmer, right? Gary, Indiana, pretty bad area, 100,000 houses and rents 1,200. Midwest too. The injection of wealth is coming from the illegal aliens. I wouldn't count on that. All right. Gary, Indiana is a ghost town, toxic too. All right. Do you think HELOCs are good for home improvement, or is it better to avoid the debt? I think that would probably be better penciled out on paper to find out whether or not the loan is going to improve the house more than what it's going to cost you. So if it's just for your own like pleasure of having a better house to be in, then I wouldn't think that would be the greatest like financial move. It might be good for you just personally to have a better place to live in. But really you have to pencil that out saying, after I take this out to improve my home, how much is my home going to be worth, or how much more can I rent it out for? Something like that, and is that going to pay for the loan that I'm taking out? Like, is it going to be worth it that way? Does it yield out, right? Does the yield work? All right. Man, I've been out here for almost 3 hours, guys. What time is it? 3:40. I'm going to have to call it quits here. I'm going to call it quits in 4 minutes, even though I'm having a lot of fun hanging out with y'all. All right, strong local economies are what creates stable real estate markets. Yeah, I can believe that. If you have good manufacturing jobs in your area, then you're going to have a good, stable, real estate environment, I believe, as well. All right. What about the people who are about to retire from switchboard operating in a few years and were maybe 50, 60 years old? They got an opportunity to do what they want with their lives. Okay. So you're taking out a particular, you're not generally speaking. Let's talk generally speaking, okay? So yeah, there was some people who were about ready to retire from their switchboard operation, lost their job, and now what? Okay, yes, there were some of those people. You're absolutely right about that, and they're going to have to go get a job at McDonald's or something. However, generally speaking, most of those people probably went off and did something more advantageous with their life, And that's what I'm assuming happened, considering the environment that we are now in today, right? All right. Depends on what you want to do with their lives. Low expectations equals happiness. That's right. If you, yeah, it's the expectations that most people have out there is the reason why they suffer so much. But if you have low expectations, it equals happiness. You're absolutely right about that. All right. Hello from the Northeast. All right. Lumberjack landlord, exactly. Question is, what happens to the real estate values in shithole Indiana? All right. Capital in form of fiat trash is going to zero. Some older fiats are trash. Although I rented a nice fiat when I was in Europe, suicide doors and all. Non-essential workers will rise. Hands-on trades will thrive. Be an apprentice, learn a trade, and if you are, they are all IOUs, nothing to study. John Exeter. You don't like dialogue, do you? You prefer making proclamations. Okay. Would you agree to work for currency that no gold dealer would accept in exchange for gold? No, but then again, I don't think that currency would exist, right? Like that's a hypothetical situation that would never exist. Like there's no currency out there that would be widely accepted that no gold dealer would take. That doesn't happen. I mean, that's completely imaginary. Invest in Hunter Biden art. Only gold is money. The entire monetary system is backed by gold, full stop. Well, I mean, eventually, if you take away all the fiat currency, then gold is the only thing that's left, but, what? I don't even know what crime coin is. Are you talking about BTC? It's not the same, right? It's not as good. It's good in a lot of... When I say that it's good as gold, it's about the function that it has. It's not good as gold because they're not even the same thing. Right? I already said that gold is a much better currency than Bitcoin is because gold can exist without Bitcoin, but Bitcoin can't exist without gold. You're making things up. Simon thinks. You don't know what I think. Come on, bro. All right, the FBI stole the White House code. Sacrificed. Okay. So if it was gold standard and gold was backed under Bretton Woods, then it is still backed at the same way today. Your argument that there are more dollars than can be redeemed. All right, Richard, I'm not sure where you're getting at on this, right? Like what it is you're trying to say, as far as like the dollar is backed by gold. But if this is your belief, then go with it, man. I mean, that's cool. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to change your belief in what the dollar is backed by. I mean, if that's your if you're convinced, if that's your conviction that that all these dollars out there have a backing of gold behind it, and you've convinced yourself in your mind that that's the case, then that's the case. That's the reality of the situation for you. I don't see it that way, and I'm not sure how to see it your way, right? I mean, but I'm not trying to say you're wrong. I'm not. Like, you're absolutely right in your belief in the way that you're thinking about it, right? I'm not thinking about it that way. Hunter Biden's presidential campaign slogan will be 8 ball for every American. Money printer goes bird. All right. That's why France in the 70s sent a battlefield into New York to get their gold. Yeah, that's exactly it. They realized there was no way that they were going to be able to, that all these people out there who had all these dollars were going to be able to go and get all their gold, right? Not what they anticipated that they were going to get. It's because there's no way that it could have happened. I'm getting ready to put high prices on my duplexes and sell them, tired of dealing with renters. 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 9 Sunday, right? Only 90 minutes. I watch you after I finish mine. I come to UA for market perspective. Yeah, and when I see Lumberjack Landlords on, I wait till he's done before I do my live stream, because I know there's so many people who cross over, and I know they want to get Lumberjack Landlord's information for his rental, and real estate information, which is much better than what I have, especially if you're in that game, and I don't want to take that away from them. I mean, I think that's good information to have. including myself. I mean, I try to watch as much of it as I can to listen to his points and views, and his experiences that he's had. It's very valuable stuff. I know a builder doing spec townhouses now, but will rent them for $17 a month, coastal Maine. My Mexican parents are moving back to Mexico because all the jobs are moving from China to Mexico. Well, not all of them, but there's a bunch of them going back there. My grandparents thought we would have flying cars by the 90s. We do have flying cars, right? They're just not everybody's got them. But they do exist, right? Flying cars exist. Not saying technology isn't advancing fast, but don't underestimate the power of human imagination. Right. But that's the thing, Kyle. I mean, it may not be to the point that we're all using them, but they exist. That's the point, that they are here. All right, everything is a rich man's trick, Simon. That's how rents go up. Well, okay, other than short little moments in history, can you ever name a time that rents went down on a consistent basis? No, they always go up. In fact, it's always been the problem throughout history, right? Is how do you pay the rent? Simon, you can build a spec cabin on my land. Right on. All right, Maine is brewing up some same conditions as France, lockstep with California. Billionaire views. Location. Really appreciate your work, Simon. Thanks again. Well, thank you, Brody. All right, 15-minute city. My ghost town is a 3-day city. I have 3-day walk to the city too. Uneducated crush-onomist. I know a number of investors in Gray, Indiana that do very well on cap returns. There you go. No cow farts means no cow parts. Alright. Section 8 would probably be practically mandatory in Gray, Indiana. It isn't mandatory, but Section 8 does well. Market is about 15% higher in Gray, Indiana. Invest in lab meat. My parents thought we'd all be using them. Yeah, and well, my dad was saying that cars would be driving themselves by now too. And we do have cars that drive themselves, right? But not all cars drive themselves. But they do exist, is the point that we're, that I'm getting at, is that just because we all don't use them doesn't mean that it isn't happening, right? And although our grandparents had like this vision of like everybody doing it, like the Jetsons or something like that, that may not be the case, but it doesn't mean that it didn't happen, right? Like we have the flying cars, we have self-driving cars. Give it some more time, they might become more prevalent to the point that everybody has them. But to say that it didn't take place, that's not accurate either. It just didn't happen to the scale that they thought it was going to occur. Because it would be different if like they didn't exist. Like our grandparents had this imagination of flying cars, and then today there's no flying cars that exist, but that's not what happened. I mean, they imagined flying cars back in the day, and we have flying cars today. We just don't have like mass production of them and everybody using them. Guys, it was a ton of fun hanging out here with you, but it's been 3 hours. I need to go hang out with the family, go and do some other stuff with my Sunday other than just chat with you, although I would just love to just chat with you all day, every Sunday. I got to go and do some other things. So, Uneducated Economist, thank you all for being here. We got 85 of you who stayed throughout this entirety to the end of this live stream. 208 thumbs up. Thank you so much for hitting the thumbs up and supporting the channel. And thank you for the super chats. That is like so touching that you guys would take the time to actually send me a little bit of a donation to, help support the Uneducated Economist, to ask a question or two, so that we can bring this awareness to everybody, so that we can all be making the best decisions for ourselves and with the belief systems that we generate. Right? All right. Uneducated Economist, you let me know. You guys have a great afternoon.